What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Between Two Heads. My name is Jameson, Welbourn. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Addison, DeMoura. Today, we are with somebody who needs no introduction. We are joined by Mario Guzman, a.k.a. Sherbinski. Sherb, thank you so much for taking the time, bro.
My pleasure, boys. My pleasure.
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you.
Welcome.
So before we touch on all the exciting projects you're working on right now, as always, with all of our guests, we like to take it back to the beginning. So I know you grew up in Sacramento. Can you share with us a little bit what your childhood was like?
Shit. Growing up in Sacramento, grew up pretty poor, as a lot of kids in that area. I was like 1982, young Sherb, 6 years old, 5 years old, actually, say 81. And, but my parents got me into sports. And I was always a big kid. I was always strong, athletic, fast. And I was able to just like, I was like little Babe Ruth. I was crushing home runs. I was like, do fine, I was a good teammate. And so I was always in sports, just baseball. I mean, I really could have gone far in baseball. I could have gone far in football. I started smoking a lot of weed in high school and focused on other interests. But sports was always a big part of my upbringing. I got a lot of friends and knew a lot of people because I played ball, and I always was like on the tournament teams. Like, after we'd win the championship, we'd go at TOC and shit. And so, and shout out Pony Baseball, a lot of kids, I think, growing up were in that system, in that league, and just met a lot of people, even to this day, I'll see people that I play baseball with. So just overall, like, had a happy, just growing up in Sac. Anybody who's grown up in Sac, it's an interesting place to grow up. It's rough, I mean, I wouldn't say it's like inner city LA type shit, but it's just a lot of drug, a lot of meth, even that was back then, but a lot of, tweakers and shady individuals. And, it was just like, it was pretty rough. And back then growing up, we used our fists and we fought a lot. And if you talk shit, you got, someone would show up eventually and you would have to fight. And a lot of times you got, I was fortunate enough that I would work my way through it. But I grew up in a day where you had to answer for your mouth and shit. And like, you would have to fight. And if somebody's bigger brother would come and fuck you up or something, he'd punch you in the face or in the chest and you'd kind of buckle and he'd be like, "What's up, boy?" And then you'd learn. And that's how shit was done. It was a different time, but I'm super fortunate. And we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have computers, and we drank Cokes, like, with not giving a fuck, and like, we had sugar and all the other shit, and no one gave a fuck. And it was just it was a good time, especially a lot of us that, if you want to get a hold of me, leave me a message, on a note on my door, or if I had an answering machine, I'll get to you when I can. Other than that. Yeah. If you wanted to talk to girls and shit, you actually had to like call or talk to their dad or something, be like, "Hey, Mr. John, this is Mario, Melanie home or whatever. Who are you?" "Oh, I'm just a friend."
So looking out front for where all the bikes are piled up to know where the homies are at, right?
Yeah. But in general, that was, and I was like, I was like a poor Mexican kid, and like there was a lot of that with bullying and certain things that I had to go through. That was part of my childhood. My dad is an immigrant from Mexico. So like a lot of those elements, and a lot of people that can relate when you're poor and your parents are from another country and you're just kind of like, you don't have the new shoes and you wear the same pants 2 or 3 days in a row. It's like, there's also a lot of that I came up with as well, which I think a lot of people could relate to.
Absolutely. So your grandfather was a fighter pilot, a real estate broker, and also an entrepreneur, opening up the first chain of piano stores in California. What kind of influence did he have? Was he present all your life growing up, or only for a certain amount of time? What was your relationship with him like?
Damn, Jameson, I like those factoids you had already, because I didn't even know I really talked about that. Yeah, so my mom was adopted. She's 100% Irish, and I didn't find this out until like 5 years ago. After she passed away, I did a 23andMe. And I realized that she was Irish, but I was raised by Sicilian Italians, and my grandfather that adopted my mom was just an OG. Like he had alopecia, so he had no eyebrows. He was bald. He was a big guy like me, and he just had a presence. And he didn't care if you were white, black, brown. When he came up to you, he starts rapping in Italian, blah, 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 you know, going off. And they're like, we don't know Italian. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. You know, like he had a way about him. He would drop little jokes and he always had a little wink that he'd like drop on you. And I'd be like, yo, like, what's up with the wink? Grabs it. He always know how to control the room, but I looked up to him. And so I'd have he had a garden in his backyard with all his tomatoes and all of his greenery and his, you know, all of his onions and everything. And so when we went over to dinner, he would go out there in his robe and grandma would be, you know, getting everything ready. He would pick all the things. We'd make the rigatoni. It was very traditional Sicilian kind of upbringing. But, you know, yeah, he was an entrepreneur. He, you know, he grew up in a similar to my father's story, on my dad's story, which we can get into, but he grew up in a 15 by 15 shack, no running water, dirt floor, got the shit beat out of him. When I talk about like abused, like on another level, you know, so he came over here from Sicily with his family. I don't know, the 40s, 50s. I don't know exactly when, but he was just a hustler, man. And he got really good at real estate. He became a broker. He inspired me to become, I wanted to be a broker. I did real estate for about 4 or 5 years. You know, I was successful at that. But, you know, he inspired me a lot. And he was what I consider like just they broke the mold on guys like that. You know, it's just like, it's, you know, that people in the community that had such a presence and just gave so much, whether it was just talking to your homie in the corner, talking some shit and like a joke and like you talking man to man in the community. And one thing I loved about it, he loved music so much and he played the accordion and my grandma would sing and it was really old school. But, you know, I always talk about what you just mentioned about him, why he was successful. And I try to take a lot of those principles and take it into what I do. But, you know, he had the first chain of piano stores up and down California. I mean, that's a big fucking thing for an immigrant from Italy. But his whole thing was he had these amazing piano stores. First ones were in Fresno. But he would have all these professionals that would teach. And his whole thing was, if you came and you bought a piano, they're not the cheapest, but if you bought a piano for me, we give you lessons for life. And so he would literally, that was part of it. And so he was just really successful at that model. And, you know, it's kind of like that, teach someone to fish, you know, instead of just, you know, that principle, I think is like what I carry in and try to like pass on, you know, knowledge to people that want it. But let me pause there. That was Gramps, you know, he's a legend. You know, he got Alzheimer's like in the 80s or something. And I watched him, you know, kind of decline. It was tough, you know, but, you know, just like the flowers we grow, right? We all have our peaks and then things come to an end. But
enjoy them.
I feel like I'm right in that sweet spot right now, you know, 45, going to be 46 next, you know, just things are like, despite what's going on in the industry and everything, you know, we have our health and, you know, I've got amazing people around me now that are just like really supporting what I'm doing. So I feel lucky, you know, just like where I'm at now.
Absolutely. So before we move on, I wanted one more question about your family, because I know listening to First Smoke of the Day, it sounded like you had a really cool mom that was very open to allowing things to happen and experiences to take place. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, your parents and both your mother and father and the influence they had on you?
Yeah. First thing that comes up about mom is like, you know, my mom was a free spirit. She was a hippie. She was the wild one, like to the core. My dad is like super conservative, by the book cop, you know, just like my dad was so by the book. Like I was out in the middle of nowhere, like camping, and I was throwing rocks at a sign and he yelled at me and said, "Hey, that's county property. Don't fucking throw rocks at that sign." And I was like, Jesus Christ, Dad, I'm a fuck in the middle. That's how by the book my dad was, you know? So I grew up very strict, very, you know, he ruled with a stern hand, if you know what I mean. And so that was always part of, you know, a lot of yelling in my house, you know, but my parents were public servants. My dad was a police officer for 30 years. He taught himself English because he wanted to be, you know, watching cartoons and shit and talking to me when I was little, because he wanted to be a police officer so bad. And to him, being a cop in the US was like such an honor, you know, and like coming from where he came from, so he was, big respect to my dad, and I have certain feelings about that industry, if you will. But he was what was cool about with my dad is like I grew up in Sacramento, and he was on the streets, and my friends and people, they ran into him and they knew Officer Guzman, and we have the same name. His name is actually, I won't get into what his real name is, but he has a different name than me, but it was different. People couldn't say it, so they ended up calling him Mario anyway. So I was kind of like junior. So anywhere I went, and I got in a lot of shit in Sac. I got into, it was rough, whether it was fights or this or being in the wrong place at the right time, wrong place. Then I would get into shit. But when I would say my name, people would be like, Mario Guzman is your dad? And I'd be like, yeah. So it it helped, because Sac's, like a big city, but it's still also a small town. So that helped a lot. Mom was a public servant. She was a nurse. She was an RN, and I saw her. She worked in hospitals, from Sutter and, different, where I was born in Carmichael, different hospitals where she was an RN. And at the end, she was a live-in hospice nurse. And so when I was young, for years, I would be at homes, and she literally, because both my parents worked night shift, and I would stay with her when she was in these homes. And I was like, I saw that was pretty rough, where she'd take care of these people, and I didn't understand at the time. But then I'd be like, hey, Mom, why aren't we, at Mrs. Jones's house, anymore? And she would explain to me, oh, Mrs. Jones passed away, honey. And like, I'd be like, so I was dealing with shit like that with my mom, and the compassion and also the spiritual side of it. Like, I was there a couple times when it was like she would come into me and she'd be like, oh my God, I just literally saw their spirit like leave the room. And there's a lot of shit like involved with that, and being the last person that someone is with. Like, that's why you hear these stories where people give like their whole wealth to like the people that take care of them, because they're like, okay, this is all my money. My kids aren't here. No one love fucking here for me. Who's here for me? This person I'm paying, and they're giving me more love. Like, so it's a very personal thing. And so my mom did that, and really compassionate, loving person. So I think it's interesting how, like, my dad, I was geared up to be a cop, and I was because I grew up like rafting, and because my dad was also water rescue, and he did like the diving, and that was part of what he did. And so he was like hanging out with firefighters. He was hanging out with like all, if you guys know about police or firefighters, they all kick it and hang out and talk shit, and they're wild. But I was like, the guy who does the hiring for the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, I think I won't say any names because he literally, the old motherfucker, I think he's still doing OT like somewhere out there, for 55 bucks an hour. So shit, I won't fucking
more than that.
My first beer when I was rafting, like 11, 12 years old. He's like, oh, you're 6 foot, Mario, here, you could do it. I look at my dad, he's like, gives me the nod. I'm throwing back beers rafting with these guys. So I was a shoo-in to be like, to have a good career as a Sacramento County Sheriff. That was my track. And my dad was just like, I remember sitting in our little house in Antelope, out there. And I went to Roseville High, and I was just wrapping that up. I'll tell you guys a little story about how that ended. That was funny. But dropped out of high school, and shit, where was I?
You're talking about
my career choice. So we're sitting in my little house, and I went up to my dad, and I was all pumped, and I was like wide-eyed, and I go, yeah, Dad, I'm ready. Like, school's done. I'm going to go to the academy, like hook me up with Rick. And he's just like, and he like looked at me and he goes, son, and he kind of put his hand on my shoulder, his hand on my shoulder. And he goes, if you could do anything else, do something else. And I go, why, Dad? Like, I want to do this. I want, because I look up to my dad. And he's just like, I deal with the biggest pieces of shit like every day. Like, and he goes, to be able to fucking deal with these people, you have to become like you have to think like they do, because if not, they're gonna run all over you. And like, so I have to gear myself a certain way every day. So like, I'm on top of these motherfuckers. And he goes, and I don't want you to have to be geared like that. And I just was like, I didn't get it at the time, but I was like, damn, because if you really understand the mentality of police officer, a good cop, even a good cop. And I'll proudly say my dad, even though I don't agree, and I, with everything, that's a whole conversation, but it's one thing my dad told me, and why I respect him, is he goes, I knew, let's say I busted somebody and they had like a gram or two of meth, or they had something that, and they were on, and I know at that moment, if I bust them, I arrest them, they're going to fucking prison, period. And he's those, in that moment, it's like, I always try to have compassion, you know, and make the right decision. Like if he needs a pass or not, or whatever. And it's like, it's not the judges or all the people that make a lot of the decisions. It's these fucking police officers, you know, right? And as we're learning in society, a lot of that's being abused, you know, especially with the minorities. And that's a whole nother conversation we go into. But I think what I wanted to take from it is like, I respected him because whether I was on the streets, whether it was my friends that he busted their parties and broke up in high school and college, whether they got pulled over, everybody would always call me and be like, dude, your dad was solid. He gave me a break. He did this, he did that. Yeah. Other cops, firemen, oh, your dad's solid. He's always so. I got a lot of respect for him. We don't always see eye to eye. Super conservative guy, you know, obviously. You know, I dropped, when I was 17, I dropped my little 20 sack of weed out in front of him when I was pulling something out of my pocket. And he's like, what's that? And I was like, that's my weed. And he looked at me and he was like, you're smoking? I was like, yeah. And he goes, for how long? I go, I don't know. Just started. And it was just kind of like he just kind of gave me a look like he wasn't pleased, but he never really told me not to, but he would take things from me. You know what I mean? He'd be like, oh, I was going to give you a car, or I was going to help you with school. I'm not helping you anymore. Why, Dad? Because you're fucking smoking weed. And I'd be like, it was always that with me. And I fucking hated him for that. You know, and, you know, these are the kind of things that like divide families and shit. You know what I'm saying? Is like, and it did. You know, part of that is like, you know, I mean, fuck, dude. How many of us were those stoner kids? And everyone's like, you fucking loser stoner kids. And then, you know, 5 years ago and shit, if we even mentioned we were in the cannabis industry, they're like fucking sucking us. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, like, you know, it's just like, it's funny how it all comes full circle. But absolutely. Mom and dad, public servants. I think I chose the cannabis industry, or the cannabis industry chose me. The plant chose me. You know, I moved to the Bay Area from Sacramento when I was 19 because I hated it. And I just felt like it was such a toxic environment with the people I was around. And I was just like dying inside. And when I went to the Bay Area, I always felt inspired. And I always felt like as soon as I would go over that bridge, like the energy would just rise. I could feel it. And I'm an energy person. And at that time in like 98, 99, that was like the Bay Area was fucking popping. Like, you know, it was like before, I think the .com or right around that area. But like I was there before when everything busted, .bomb. But there was a ton of money in the Bay. I mean, that time was like, I think it was like, I don't know what decade you could relate it to, but it was fucking nuts. Like .com era, you know, I was in that, experiencing that, and then going to the Bay. And
let me just take it back a little bit, Sherb. So 94, you left school 6 months early. You got into an altercation. What happened immediately after that? Is that when you started in real estate?
I started doing construction with my stepdad. And I was, a lot of the homes in Elk Grove, in those tract homes and around the water, there's like, I built a lot of those, you know, back then. And that was what I did for like a year. And then literally I was just smoking weed, and I couldn't handle the 106-degree, 110-degree heat. And I was like dying. I was like, I can't fucking do this. Like I was with Mexican crews that don't fuck around. If you're lazy, if you slack, you're fucking out. Because you would get paid per house. And so the faster you frame them, like, everyone would get paid as a crew. And I was like, I could work hard, but I'll tell you, these motherfuckers, like, especially these guys are like, I was like 18. They were like, you know, 30, been doing it 10 years, fucking just, these guys know how to sling hammers. So I got my little electrical, I got my construction. Here's how God works, though. You know what I mean? Like, so he was like, I'm gonna give you a little fucking grow room skills, Mario. So like, when you go to the Bay, you're gonna be able to do the shit on your own. And those skills helped me a ton. I did all my framing. I put my doors in. I can basically run most of my electrical. I have my little homie come by and connect it because I don't like that part. But you know, gave me the skills. But immediately after high school, I was like full on gonna go to Bible college in Pensacola, Florida. I had a girlfriend I was dating, and the only way her parents would let me hang out with her is if I was go to church. So I was like, I'll go to church. So that time I was hanging out with her, and then one day I was like probably all lit and, you know, smoked a joint. And I was in there and the sermon was going down and I was like, holy shit, they're talking to me, you know? And it was like one of those moments. And honestly, that's why, like, think what you want about church. I think in the right environment, there is certain souls, if you will, that can be awakened to like, yo, what's up, dude? Like, you're fucking tooling off, you know what I mean? So that was like my beginning. And it led to me, it was really, what it was really about for me was like a spiritual search. I was like, damn, there's something about this spirituality shit. There's something about God. I can feel it. I know it. But what the fuck is it? Let me dive into this shit because this is what's up. And I just dove into it. And you guys want the real report? Like, in the end, in the church, I was exposed to the bullshit behind it. I was exposed to the fakeness of it because I was real. I was as real as it fucking came. And they were intimidated by that. Well, they welcomed it at first, but then they were intimidated by it when I could look in and I could see that a lot of it was fake, you know? And it's just like, you know, I'm not saying that church and this and all that is fake, but I think that certain people are human beings, and
yeah,
it's a business, you know? And so when I saw that, it was like, fuck, it was like, it ruined it for me. You know what I mean? Cause I thought it was all like, oh, we're all vibing and it's all this and it's all so I pumped the brakes on Pensacola, Florida, because that's where Bible college was. That's where you go to become like ordained. So I was praying and just a little bit about me. I'm a deeply spiritual person. I protect, and I've been attacked a lot in my life from that, but I've also had a lot of gains in my life from that, you know. And I'm a warrior spirit, and that's always been in me, like forever. But at that time, when I was like really, I prayed and I kind of did a meditating. I was like, what is it? If it's not this, then what is it? Where do I go? And it led me to the Bay Area, you know, and I'm an energy person. And I think a lot of people that are older, they understand that. Like at that time, the energy was in the Bay Area, you know, the creative energy, like the spiritual energy was in the Bay Area. And then, you know, went to LA, you know, then, you know, New York. And then a lot of people are like, right now, people are saying it's in Miami, right? Like a lot of this creative energy. But at that time, it was in the Bay. So it led me there. I was doing real estate. I was successful at it. You know, I was getting away from, I was still sort of like, am I going to be, you know, where's my church up in the Bay Area? But then I was always into, when I was 17, I started doing congas and Latin percussion and stuff with like the hippies dudes that I was selling weed to. And the nightclub scene was popping, and there was this club called 1015. For those of you that have ever experienced that, it was right on Folsom Street, 1015 Folsom. But it was like house music at that time. Like that music was like very underground. It wasn't something that you would hear on Pepsi commercials and shit. Like it was super underground, and it was just a lot of hot chicks, a lot of drugs, and they had a big old conga rhythm section in it. And I was like, oh, I fuck with this stuff, because I was doing like a lot of the rhythms, reggae rhythms, the pulse rhythm, a lot of the Cuban after Cuban rhythms and stuff that I was fucking with. So, but all these guys were doing a lot of these rhythms as well. So I got deep into that, you know, and started self-medicating a lot with, you know, ecstasy, at that time, LSD, some cocaine, you know, different things that I would experiment with. But, you know, I was really into like the feeling of like the ecstasy, the Molly, and and smoking weed and drinking. That was like my vibe. So I did that, and pretty self-destructive for like 2 or 3 years. But during that time, like, so that was like early 90s, right? I did real estate pretty successfully for a few years, but then the market kind of went bad. I think it was like early 2000s. I was doing really well, and then I went to doing not really well. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, I was living in the Sunset, and a friend of mine had just suggested, hey, dude, you got a little space in there, you should grow. And I had never thought about growing, but like through his suggestion is actually how I started growing. And so just to go back a little bit on the spiritual side, like I asked myself, like the answer I got and what ended up happening is like the plant found me, you know what I mean? Like it's very apparent, like how things were put in my path, you know, from the opportunities I had to grow, the legal, like just the people I had around me at the time that kind of pointed me in the direction legally. And I got the right clones, and I had just enough help, just enough where I had to really, like, I give a lot to Ed Rosenthal and Jorge Cervantes. If there wasn't for their books, then I wouldn't have successfully started in this industry, because nobody was helping anybody really at that. You had a couple of buddies that would tell you, oh, use this watering, and really it was the guys at the hydro store that were like gaming you up the most, because they wanted you to buy the shit, and they were, if they would give you a little formula, you'd buy the shit from them. And so that was an interesting part of that time. I know that you guys fuck with Bubble Man too, and I just wanted to just big up him, because like on my first grow, my little 2-lighter, my boy Super Dave gave me, and my boy Troy, my real estate partner at the time, we were both kind of fed up with real estate, and we're just like, man, we got to start growing. He had a great successful career too. He's still growing. Big ups to Troy, SF legend. He had a business card that he would sell Molly, and it was just all it said. It had a picture of Bootsy Collins, and it said the pimpologist, and it had his number on the back. And that motherfucker sold boats. Like I'm telling you, like when I say SF legend, first time I met him, I rolled up to fucking Fillmore, and that motherfucker came out with a fur coat, no shirt, and a cowboy hat, and handed me like a fucking bag of bones. I was like, who the fuck are you? And he pulled out the Bootsy Collins fucking card, and I just kind of put it in my pocket. Later, I pulled it out. It just said the pimpologist. I was like, I got to know this guy. This guy's a legend. But that's the dude that introduced me to my boy Super Dave. Super Dave was growing the OG from Josh D, because my boy Ian was friends. I met Super Dave. He gave me my first clone, a tray of clones, the Afgoo. At that time, the Afgoo, the buds were fucking like the size of like 200 bottles, and it was yanking fucking hard on the hash. And so I had never pulled. First time I ever got back. So I grew my little. So I got my tray of Afgoo from Super Dave. Definitely want to give love to these guys. These are the guys like in the early fucking days that were so. Literally, they were the Josh D boys. They were the only ones that had the cut in the Bay, because Josh was growing it in LA, but Ian grew up in the San Fernando Valley, like at that time, and he was friends with Josh, and they were all part of that crew that coming up. And so he moved, and he had it. Never met. Ian was one of those guys that was so elusive, back in like the early days, like there was always that one or two guys that you're like, fuck, if I only could meet that guy they talk about, and you could never meet that fucking guy. Like Ian was one of those guys, like, and it's like those guys are more rare now, but I miss those. Shout out to all those guys. Shout out to the boys that knew how to keep it quiet. A lot of OGs in the game are still like that, but they're a lot more rare. I mean, like even Ian now openly texting me and talking on the phone. Before, if I even said fucking, if I was going to say the word weed and I even said weed, he'd hang up and I wouldn't be able to get a hold of him for like 5 weeks. He'd punish me. And then finally I'd call him and I'd be like, bro, and he'd be like, what's up, man? Like nothing ever happened, but I knew what was up. But he was the kind of the protector and the guardian of the OG in the Bay. And all the real OGs that know, if you didn't really get it, if it wasn't from Ian, and he was that dude. And so Super Dave, I think he was a DJ. I think a lot of people know him by Vaj. So if you're really OG and you know who Vaj is, that's who Super Dave is. But just really smart dude, really like loves the plant. He taught me like really just kind of really intellectual side of like growing and his technique. But anyhow, going back to, so I grew my shout out to those guys, but I grew my little 2-lighter. The first grow, they came over and they're like, who the fuck grew this? And I was like, I did, with Ed's help and fucking Jorge's help. And they're like, oh my God, bro, this is insane. Like the buds were fucking huge. And I was like, well, what else can I do? And so at that time, the internet didn't really have a lot, very limited, but Bubble Man had like a website or something where you could like buy his bags. I forget, or at the time, maybe one video or a how-to something, maybe not even a video. It was just kind of like, this is what you do. So I got my bubble bags, and then I fucking, I think it was a garbage can and ice from Safeway and shit. And I just was like, I just did it the old, at the time, not even the drill. I was literally just like, who knows? But my first time I yanked it and it was just like, it was just this fucking amazing ass fire ass hash. And I like didn't really know what I was doing, but it cured. And then I ended up making these balls and I would like put them on, the wax paper and the cardboard. And I was kind of like flipping, just drying it out. And then it would just, once it kind of cured, it wouldn't mold. And I was just making these hash balls. And I took them. So I took my first bit of weed. Well, I'd make them into these little patties. There'd be like these flat, shiny ass patties that would just fucking heat. And so the first time I went down, I'll skip a lot of these details are out there, but I went to a bunch of different spaces. At this time, mind you guys, this was the birth of like the medical movement. Like, yes, there was the history of the Dennis Perones and the 90s and things like that. And then but this was like there was only like 10 dispensaries in the whole Bay Area. You know what I mean? That were actually on the Department of Public Health's website in San Francisco. You had to have a little card. You'd register with them. They'd give you access. That's how you got in the dispensary. That was your access. But there was only like 10, and I would go and they were in shady ass places. So I went to a few and I was like, what the fuck? So I ended up on Lower Haight at the Vapor Room. And big ups to Martin, who's still my friend. And, he's just a pioneer in the industry. And I learned a ton about compassion. And like, this is like at that spot, he bought my first pounds. Like I wanted like $3,000 or something, or 2,500. He gave me 38 or 4 or something, some stupid price. He gave me $25 for my hash. And at that time I was like, if I get 10 or 15 bucks, I'd be happy. And just, it was the beginning. I fell in love with the industry. I remember the people I would help. And I remember people coming to me and saying, man, like your medicine, I love it. And like, when's the next harvest coming? And I'd be like, there was just this relationship like you had, like, and you were making bread. You knew when you harvested it was done. Like it was no competition. There was no testing. There was no packaging. There was no all this bullshit. It was just like, yo, this is my weed. I grew it with love. Here, you want it? Boom. And it was immediately out into and it was just, it worked. And, for those of you that didn't have a chance to be in the industry in that time, I mean, it sucks because like, it was just, yes, I'm all about the safety. Yes, I'm all about all the things. And there's a lot of positives in what's happened, but that old kind of like Grateful Dead, what I like to call it, and a lot of these kids these days don't understand what that is. It's a different time, but it was really like a spirit of, like even like Burning Man mentality. Like, it's like just kind of a society where it's not about money. It's not about status. It's about like sharing. And I'm right here at this time and you need this and I need that. Here you go. And you need a hug or you need to fucking get slapped, like whatever it is. Like, and it was just a different type of, and these are the people that I found, like as I went around the Bay Area and these dispensaries grew and it went from 10 to 15 to 20 to 25 to 50. And then it was LA and it was like, it was still me with my backpack going to these dispensaries like, hey, how are you? You know what I mean? I'm Mario and this is my weed and this is my stuff. And like, and building that relationship, and I'm still fucking doing that. And it's like, I'm so like, I got away from that for a while because you've got your PAD team and you've got your executives and you got all this. And then they'd be like, well, they want you to come, Sherb. And I'd be like, well, okay. And really? And I was like humbly surprised. And then I show up and then it's like, boom, it's like, oh my God, this is what I've been missing. I remember this. Like, it's that relationship. What's your name? Your face? What do you need? And there's just something about when you make a product and it's yours, there's something about that relationship where people get it, right? You get them as a business owner and they get you, like, and if you can kind of meet them halfway, I think it's the key to our future, really, is like, fuck all the bullshit and hype. It's a lot of what we talk about, Addison. It's like, even with what you're doing with company, is just like creating solutions based on reality and what can be done with this plant that a lot of people, even including myself, are still like being educated heavily on. So, but that was kind of, I fell in love with the, I say this a lot, but at that time, I decided, to partner with the plant, and that's like my motto, I because through all the hype and all the fun shit, all the backstage stuff and all the access and things I've been given because of this, like, it's all, none of it is important compared to like the conversations I had like on Hate Street with those people, and they were like, dude, you changed, you know, I slept last night because your weed like really helps me. And that kind of shit still drives me. And even now, even through COVID, like I realized it kind of made us all sit back and go, yo. And it's not about like, oh, we're, you know, we're still can open and we're open and the pride behind that. I'm talking about like, damn, when the shit really hits the fan, what really matters, right? And
so those times had a lot of like a heavy focus on compassion, and it's almost like Bryan Adams says, those were the best days of our lives. Like, it's true. Those were because man, like you said, the accounting was insane. Like, you just grew weed and brought it to a dispensary, sold it, and they're like, all right, man, have a great day. And like, you just fucking kept going, you know, and kept doing it. So no, those were really great days. And I think that like we're getting almost to the point where in the story, I think the story gets most interesting. And that's like when you start growing, you're going to dispensaries, you're getting the product out, you're getting the attention. How far from there to the point where the Sherb is kind of born, and what's the story sound like from that point to then?
Well, I think the next chapter of the story was like Cookie Fam for me, right? Because, you know, I was living in the Sunset. I was doing martial arts. I was, a lot of people, I've talked about this before, but I did Muay Thai, studied Muay Thai for 10 years. I ended up fighting, really just like just about to become amateur, but I ran around at smokers and I beat the shit out of guys, and, you know, and it was like, I loved it. And I traveled around the world, you know, with some of the best fighters in the world at that time. My boy, Kai Hollenbeck, shout out Kai, you know, from, you know, China to the Netherlands, and, you know, just real shit. Like, and so I love that, you know, I'm a warrior spirit. As I've said, I love fighting. I love the art of war. I'm very competitive. So that was a big side of what I was doing in while I was growing. You know, I also had a clothing brand called Savage Inc. Fightwear, and that was kind of born out of like my love for Muay Thai. And at that time, the only people that had like clothing lines was like Tap Out, and like it was just early on. Like there really wasn't like, I don't know if you guys remember after Tap Out, but there was like fucking 50 different martial art fucking like everybody blew up. But I was like right in there, and I was making bread because I was actually making things that were around Muay Thai based, which didn't exist. They had like stick figures and shit from Thailand, and it was like the worst fucking thing. So that was also part of how I met a lot of people, you know, in the Bay. You know, Dog Boy was one of my students, you know, my boy Matt, and Matt, we had the same tattoo artist. It was literally like a Matrix type shit, because he had, you know, my tattoo on my back has a, you know, if you have tattoos that are colored, there's a certain shading like to it, right? And a certain artists, it kind of fades and looks like, if you look at other people that have had pieces, it's kind of from certain times. So this is so fucking random, or else I never would have asked him. But I literally was like, yo, who did your piece? And he goes, oh, it's my boy Joe on Mission. And I was like, what? I was like, that's my guy. And that's what brought us together. And then I was like, yo, you smoke weed? And he's like, yeah. And I go, well, what's up? And then we went to Thai food with the whole team that night. And that motherfucker, like, I would roll joints. I was like, I'll admit, before that, I was rolling fucking weak ass joints, like small papers and shit. Like, you know what I mean? I did not understand or appreciate the fucking love and appreciation of a fatty. So this guy came up and he had like a fucking, you know, OG joint that was like fucking huge. And at dinner, and I was like, and it was fire. It was that one. And I was like, what the fuck? We became friends, and he goes, yeah, you should come to my house. I live right here. It ends up being like 2 blocks from where I live. And cool. I just started going over to his house. When I had a newborn, I'd put the women and children to bed, you know what I mean? Kids and wifey all taken care of. She's in bed, baby asleep. And I would ride my skateboard down the street. And so this house was like, it was a fucking mess. First of all, it was like dog hair all over. I go downstairs, all soil. The whole, you know, those houses, like, no fucks given, like the whole soil. And I was like, what the fuck? And there's shitty ass nasty plants. And he was like, oh, don't worry, we're getting 4,800 for all that. Like, I was like, really? He goes, yeah, but don't matter. And then going upstairs, shotguns, rifles, automatic, like just you name it. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, I kind of like this, you know what I mean? Because I'm a martial artist. I like weed. my girlfriend or anybody else, or my wife, I couldn't bring her within 10 miles of this place, but this was like a guy's type of spot.
Mm-hmm.
So my boy Pitt was one of the guys that was like friends with Matt, and I grew with him for fucking 10 years, and he was like one of my best partners. I met him as one of the people that would just come by the house and stuff. I met Jigga, first time I met him was just, he had a little backpack, came in, and he was just trapping his cherry pie that had mad seeds, and he had some cookies, and he had Y, and he had all, that was like his little lineup. And he was working with Kenny, just the history. They've known each other since they were like, Jigga was in high school. Jigga used to sleep on Kenny's couch. Like, so they have like a lot of history. And Burner, I think they went to high school together, something like that. So like Burner also knows like Kenny. That's why they're like Cookie Fam. They had like their little unit. And from what I understand, like, I know Flux, had like certain genetics, and I don't even know, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors around that shit. And like a lot of people have said things, and like I wasn't involved. Like when I came in, Wildlife, Cherry Pie, Cookies, what am I missing? Those were already there. And they were like passing those around. Those were like the ones they were, and there was like at that time, Kenny also had the F1, and then the F1 Derb, and then he had the Derb, and then there was all these elements of like cookies, but like the Derb, like it had the structure, but I didn't like the high, and I didn't like the taste, but it had the structure that you get. Just so you know, like anybody that ever took any cookie structure, including gelato, like a lot of that comes from that Derb. Like I'll tell you right now, if you got that, you would be like, oh yeah, this is like that structure comes from that, and it was beautiful. And he had some other like interesting stuff. Kenny had some heat. You know what I mean? And he's been selling weed for a long time. And so I think Jigga, I don't know where it was, but then what I hear, the stories I heard was, I don't know. I've heard stories that Flux's dad had some seeds, and they were in a house, and someone took some seeds or something. I don't know who. And then those were kind of the seeds that got popped that made cookies, is like part of what I've heard. There's been a lot of people that this is their claim. It's like, well, I was in the house. I was a roommate in the house where the seeds got popped, and they'd like taking claim to the strain. But none of that is really my business. And I'm like, when it comes to that kind of shit, my name's Bennett, and I ain't in it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, not my business. So I never tried to take claim to any of that. Like, and so I mean, but what's sad is similar to with gelato, even with all that, there's family beef and stuff I've seen, and like shit goes like, it's stupid, man. Like what's the shit that goes down with these genetics and these strains? I see it now with like all these guys that have hot strains now and shit, and like just the syndrome that comes along with it. It's sickening, and so I think about this often. It's that competitiveness though that drives our industry, but it's also part of what sucks about it. I wouldn't want to change it because I love the competitiveness, and it's really what makes us better, right? Like when you're a competitive, you're like, fuck, your weed's better than me. Damn it, I'm gonna go fucking breed some new shit. You know what I mean? Like, fucker, I'm gonna get you. Like that is part of what we love about it too. But there's an evil side of that. And I think there needs to be a little bit more balance. And part of what I'm doing is just freeing the weed. That's like my 2022 like motto. Like I've never given my cuts, my seeds, anything I've made out to anybody. Never. This is the first year where I'm like, here's 1,000 seeds. Here's fucking 800 seeds. Here's this. Because as I get older and I realize the work and time it takes to do this work, like it's so key to have these testers. It's so key to see what is going to be there, and like there's going to be some good stuff that comes out, but there's also a lot of work and time and energy that and love that needs to go into that process. And before I release any seeds, like one thing I've learned is just I'm gonna double, triple check all my shit. I'm gonna grow it. I'm gonna have all my friends grow it. I'm gonna grow it in the greenhouse. I'm gonna grow it outdoors, and I'm gonna know what the fuck I'm giving you, and no one's gonna come and tell me that, oh, your shit didn't pop, or this wasn't good, or this wasn't that. I'd be like, oh yeah, well here's the photos that we did, and here's how, and this is the results we got, and these are so I just think if one thing I've learned, because I've never considered myself a breeder, I've never claimed that, I think people have called me that and give me credit for that, but I just fuck around with plants. Like if seeds are fun, like, pop them. Oh, what are they going to do? Oh, get the weirdos out. Oh, these are growing really good. And it's just a natural thing for me, a selection process all the way down to how I'm kind of a nerd. And a lot of people don't know that side of me, but I really geek out on the science of it, of like, okay. And then also balancing out like the terpenes and everything, but then like, all right, what is the testing telling us? Like, you know, and if I give it to 2 growers, like, is it saying the same thing? I geek out on that shit because it really, to me, like it makes a big difference, you know, but also, again, like this some of these strains I've smoked recently, you know, like the Zushi, I think it looked like shit. And I was like, when I was doing the what was it? The Olympics box, and I was going through everything just based on what it looked like. That was like the shittiest one, you know, but when I tasted it, I was like, holy shit. You know, so there's a human element of that can never go away. I love that aspect of it.
I want to take it back a little bit and touch on when you first connecting with Cookie Fam and Jigga, and you know, there's a lot of stuff that you didn't have a part in, but there is a lot of stuff that you were involved in. So can you talk a little bit about how that relationship evolved from first meeting Jigga to you know, becoming more involved in the operations of what was Cookie Fam at that time?
Yeah, you know, I think it was really when Jigga, you know, we'd mentioned how I'd met him, but I think you know, how our friendship really developed, because I liked Jigga because we would just smoke weed, we would laugh our ass off. I'm funny, he's funny. We just had a good friendship, and I liked his energy. You know, he's very free spirited person. You know, he's fun. You know what I mean? I mean, Jigga, like literally, Jigga took me to Louis Vuitton. I'm talking weed dude, long hair, hippie dude. We were growing, and he was the first person that kind of put me on and was like, yo, dude, come on. And I was like, hop in, and we just went down, and this is the way we celebrated, you know, and like we just made our little bag. He took me into Louis Vuitton, and he bought me like $1,000 pair of shoes, you know, and he bought himself $1,000 pair of shoes, and it was like some tennis shoes and shit. So I was like, really, bro? And he's like, yeah, hell yeah, let's go. I was like, okay. I was like, this is dope. So like we had that kind of friendship, and this was before like all these these groups and these different brands and all this stuff. Like this was like not that many like weed dudes were flexing like that, you know what I mean? And they just weren't, you know, because it really wasn't. It was a different way, like the rappers and things were, but I'm talking about more like the growers, right? Being like, yo, like we're the real motherfuckers doing this shit, not like whoever's at the end, like where's our credit? And so I think that was kind of like my relationship with Jigga. And after, it was organic, and we always were on some vibe shit. We were always on like energy and stuff. That's why we connected in the first place. And about 6 months after being friends with him, I was just like my AFGU and my OG and stuff. I was fucking with an OG cut. We could get into that a little bit more, but I went to an extensive thing with Matt and all the people growing OG. I got all the OGs and grew them all. And the one that I kept that I used for the gelato was the one that grew. It grew like twice as fast. It was just greasy. Everyone loved it. Through testing, somebody's saying that it has like lineage of like Larry OG, but that was never confirmed or anything like that. But it was, if you're going to name it, that's why I say Larry, because it was like the closest that I could say. And through testing somehow and matching, it was like kind of genetically matched with Larry. But I was getting 3,800 for my shit, and then it went down to like 3, and then 28. And then I was just friends with Jigga, and I go, yo, and I never asked him for anything. I wasn't there to like for that. I wasn't friends with him because I wanted that. I didn't even know what cookies was. I really didn't. I didn't know what half of his shit was. But just one day I was like, he saw what was up to, and we were in there messing around, and I knew Jigga kind of was looking at me because I had good grows, and I worked hard and my shit, and he was looking at me to like recruit me to grow for Cookie Fam and for like seeds and breeding, you know, because now that I know the game, that's kind of what I do with certain friends and people, like, yo, let's do this little thing. So I just said, hey man, I need something good. Like I need something to make money. I'm like, I'm drowning here. And so we just kind of naturally one day after working, we pulled up to this little spot off of Noriega in the sunset, and we walked into his house, and like there was 1 gallon pots in every square foot of the whole fucking house. It was a 2-story. Every room was cut. They were all about this big. and I'd never seen anything like it. And I just was like, holy shit. And Jigga just kind of like he didn't say a word. He just kind of walked in, spreading plants out, and just I followed him, and he took me down the stairs. And dude, there's literally plants on the stairs. Like, it was fucking crazy. And we go down to the bottom corner of the garage. This is legendary shit. It really is. Like, I'm so glad that we could like talk about it together. But and he just was like pointed to some plants. He goes, take those. And I was like, okay. And there was no label, there's no nothing. I was like, bro, I'm happy to take this, but just please, it's how much time it takes. Please, like, make sure this is some heat. And he's like, don't worry. And so he didn't even tell me what it was until I was like growing it. And then he's like, that's cookies. And I was like, okay. And no one knew shit about cookies. Only like few people like in the Bay Area had access to that. And it was being grown in such small, like only a few of the homies had it, and they were growing their little 6 lighters or 10 light, whatever it was. And that was it. Like, I think Sean Flux had to grow, and a few people, the homies had to grow, and they were making fucking bread. Right. And then no one had that kind of shit. And they were definitely flexing that. I don't know how long before, they met me, but, so I got the genetics, and I started growing it. And on my first runs, it was just like crushing. It was fucking fire. And everyone's like, oh man, you're nailing it. And so at that time, Jigga had like 4 or 5 grows in the Sunset too. And he had an employee that went bad, kind of fucked his whole scene up. And at that time, that's why he was crashing on my couch a lot, because a lot of his spots were like fucked up, and we became closer. And then it was like, Jigga, I got this. Let's just become partners. And then so I basically was like, I'm getting enough for this that I basically was giving him like half of my bread on a lot of the shit. If I had the genetics there, he would get half the bread. And so for a long time, like, I ran that model, and I was like, it was, in my spots, I was paying for everything. He was getting broke off, and it was a good partnership, and during that time, he brought in my house on 30th and Moraga. He had some pollen, and he got it from a greenhouse in, I want to say, Santa Rosa. And what I was told was it was, they called it the black. And there's different versions of this, but this is all the same story. But they called it the black because it was very stringy, and it was like dark fucking purple, like crazy. And he said it was from a male, and that he got pollen off of that, and he brought a little, but it was when we did a little bit more research, because I had a friend that was actually at that grow, or it was his Jigga, the guy he was working with, was at the guy's grow. And when I asked him, Jigga never told me this. This was like what I got from my guy. He told me it was a Burmese Kush, or a Burmese berry Kush, something or the other. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where the Kush came from, but the Burmese side, like, to me, it doesn't look like any Kush. It looks like a Burmese, because it was definitely on a sativa weirdo shit. Because I grew it out again, and it was just stringy fucking weird ass shit like I would never in a million years grow. But that pollen is what went on to my Larry. Okay, he just went in and just, a couple little buds, and so that's where my little breeding career started, where it was like, oh, I got beans, what do I do? And then I started my techniques. So I popped those, and really just on my own, and just kind of like, what are these going to do? Because you didn't really have any interest. It was just kind of like, oh, they're there kind of thing, right? And I wasn't really getting help from Jigga. I think part of it was he didn't, he had helped me and shown me certain things, but he wasn't giving me like the fucking all the tools,
the details.
Yeah. And so one of the things was, I was like, hey, these things are getting big, and I think it was like that big, and I go, what do I do with, what are we going to do? And he didn't really have a play. And so he goes, if you stick it in a flowering room, it'll trigger, and then it'll show you what it is. You just have to be on top of it. And I didn't quite understand what that means like I do now. And so I stuck it in my grandma's place. I had a 12 lighter with him, which was wild, dude. We had 200-gallon fucking pots, the bags, and then they were all rolled down. It was like this high, and it was all soil. And fucking, we had like all the cookies in there. It was some fucking heat though, but that's how we used to grow, like on pallets. So pallets in rows, and then with the bags on top, and it was just water. Fucking.
How many plants in a bag?
I think like with the cookies, I think we did 12. I did 9, I did 12, I did 16, but I think I ended up, because when you go from 12 to 16 with cookies, it's weird because sometimes you're like, oh, with 3 or 4 more plants, I'm gonna get another, and then the buds are like, no, I'm gonna be smaller this time, and like it just
It's
was
like
always
threshold.
yeah. So I'd always just try to have strong ones in there and do 12. But we had fun, man. That was cool. But so I put that in the little corner. I went on a trip for like a week, and I came back, and it literally I saw powder and shit, and I was like, what the fuck? There must have already been like some nuts and something on there because it popped fast. And so I was like, I remember calling Jai, and I was like, fuck, dude, what the fuck? Because we had our whole room in there. It was like we had whatever, like 15 pounds, something, whatever pounds. And he's like, you can't sell any of that. That's all our shit. And so it pollinated my Larry's, and it pollinated the cookies. And so I literally trimmed everything because I thought, oh, I'll get rid of it somehow or something like that. I ended up never trimming it. And I had all these seeds in the buds, and I never, and so this is what people don't get is like, so I was doing everything myself. I did all the work. I did everything. So I had cut down a lot of the cookie plants. I trimmed it all with my little family members, but I had a black garbage bag, and all of the, like when there's seeds, like all the shit and all the stems, like that shit's at the bottom. So I literally went down because I was like, there's got to be stuff in there. And I pulled out like probably 50 seeds that were like on the bottom of this garbage bag. And so even though I had like 15 pounds that were trimmed, were all full of seeds, they never got touched because I popped those. I probably more was, and I probably, because I think my originally popped like 100 seeds, but that was like the original seeds. None of those seeds ever got touched, sold. I have a jar of like, I have a small jar of them, and they're not really viable, but I think there's some techniques that I might want to fuck with them. But yeah, I popped those. That was the Sunset Sherbert. So I pheno hunted those in 2 places, one at my boy's little spot in Pacifica, and then at my spot in the Sunset. And so the next step, there's a little bit that happened in between then, but just for the sake of time, Flux at that time, so at this time, Cookie Fam is kind of like a thing, because what happened is I'm growing fire. I got the cookie stuff, and I'm giving it to Jai. Or at that time is like Cookie Monster and certain people that we were working with, like it was like a code with us, and I was taught sort of, and this is why I always respect Burner, I always respect Jigga, I always respect Kenny, because the one thing that like not only they did, we did, but they knew how to make that shit pop. They knew how to take fire and give it to the right people, and the shit would be in the right people's hands like immediately. And they were already doing that with cookies, and that's like a big reason where like Burner was able to build his career off of, is and he's excellent at that, and he was never the breeder or grower. And a lot of people have misconceptions about that he's a breeder or grower. He's not. He never has been. Like, but he was always next to like the right growers or the right breeders or the right people. And these were people he had long relationships with, and the beauty of it was like, we didn't really care if like, okay, Burner, let them think you're like, at the time, it was like, fuck it, whatever, just dump our weed. You know what I mean? We didn't give a fuck. No one was clout chasing. Like, Burner is a rapper. None of us wanted to be a rapper. Like, we wanted to grow. We had our families. We wanted to pay our bills, and we were stoked to have good weed. And that was pretty much it. So that was kind of, but at that time, Instagram was also just getting kind of popping. It was like, I want to say at that time, I mean, I don't know how long Instagram's been around, but yeah, like that's what I remember at that time. It was like, I remember someone saying, oh, there's this new platform. Snoop Dogg just got paid a couple $100,000. And he's like popping on it. And then everyone is like getting on Instagram, and Burner, within months, he had like 200,000 followers, and it was like organic. Like, he was able to really get off to a good start. And he started tagging like me and Flux and Jigga and Powers. And I think, what was Kenny before? Fuck, I remember his original name. Powers Up, he switched it, but he was Pie Guy. That's who he was. So, yeah, so Pie Guy was his original shit. And I forget what happened, why he had to change that. But yeah, it was at Pie Guy, at Flux Capacitor, at SF Flux Capacitor, at Sherbinski 415, at Burner 415, at Jigga 415. And I know, like, you talk about the good old days and like the magic. At that time, I just never experienced anything like that, where you go from what, I don't know, like culturally something happens where, you know, and there was other people out there that had cuts or thought they were whatever, but we bullied motherfuckers on Instagram because we were using our flash and our shit in a certain way that no one was doing pictures like that. So when you saw a picture, when you're scrolling, you saw, who the fuck is that? What is that? Oh my God. And it was fire, and we were backing it up. And then the right people we would tag. It was basically what people do now with Instagram, right? This was the very beginning of it, but it worked for us. We had the formula, right? Like early on, like the influencers and the product shots and we were backing it up and creating that ecosystem on the streets. And my thing was, and this was the birth of, like, to me, they had Cookie Fam, right? But I was like, yes, let's run with this. And I was growing the weed. They had other grows. I'm talking like their boys had like 10 lighters here. There was no major production. No one had warehouses going. We had our grows like in the set. And some people had little warehouses and stuff, but nothing that was big time back then. If you had 20 lights or 30 lights or 40, you were fucking big time, right? If you weren't Asian. That was a little joke for those of you that
the lethal,
but
lethal purple.
Cool. So I was, Cookie Monster was a big part of that too, because he had good relationships with like Be Legit. He had good relationship with E40. He was dealing with rappers. Like, he's the one who introduced me to what's my man out there, God? To Dolph, you know, rest in peace, young Dolph. Like, he put that together. Like, so those kind of relationships. And then Dolph ended up, you know, naming his fucking album Gelato. And a lot of people know the history about how he took that with it. So people like that organically, he had like relationships with. So, you know, I miss that guy, man. Like, I can't, you know, I definitely want to talk about his influence in the extract game. And like, I always want to tell people, like, you know, what the influence he had and what I saw as a fucking 400 something pound black man going into a white man's fucking game and earning their fucking their trust and their respect. You know what I mean? And like, it's just, it was amazing.
Wendell was everywhere, bro. I've seen just glass events. Like, and people loved him, and he had that like Bay Area.
Yeah.
For the people listening who don't know, can you give a little background on who you guys are talking about?
Yeah, Delvin, Cookie Monster, you know, Bay Area cat, big dude, you know, talking, I don't know, 400 or 500 pound big guy, you know,
big guy.
Just with a smile that just could just pierce your soul, man, just like the warmest heart. But he was just, and you know, he was like Be Legit is like his brother, right? They're not brothers, but they're like brothers. They grew up in the same area. They grew up around the same culture. He was, you know, E40. He was always part of like that history, which was a huge part of the Bay Area history. And if you go back, like, you know, as far back as we're talking, even when Cookies first started, he was just influential, and he was in the streets. You know what I mean? He was in there with the shooters. He was in there with the rappers. He was in there with everybody. And so he knew, when you talk about like infiltrating the streets and how that's important into like, and how hip hop culture can even just have influence on the real world and how tangible that is. People like him are like key components in that. Right. And so the magic for me was, they were like, keep it all in the streets. And I'd be like, man, I need to be in these dispensaries. Some like, let me take some of the fire and bring it here. And they're like, nah, give them that, whatever. And I'm like, nah, man, like, we got to build this like over here. And so from the early days, I would always like, I would have one foot in the streets and one foot in these dispensaries, because I was like, I wanted that balance. And I loved how the dispensaries would give access to people that wouldn't have access to this shit. And in the compassionate side of me and the public servant side of me was like, yo, like, this isn't, yes, the hype and everything, and this is where it should be, but this is actually good medicine too. And people, because I would give little bits and people would be like, it would be life changing. You guys remember like the early days when like this shit was going around, there wasn't weed like this before, you know, because OGs and sours were kind of fading out. You want to say something, Addy?
So was this the time when, so it sounds like this was the time when the whole Cookies crew and everybody kind of partnered up with Florin Wellness and Caleb. And then that was when like the first cookie shop, right, was up in Sac, wasn't it? Or connected.
Burner did, right? Burner did. So I was growing all the weed. So Burner was like, yo, he would be like, give these guys some and give this. And so those guys in Sac connected basically, who that's what you're talking about, right? Preferred Wellness or something like that. I think.
Yeah, it was Florin Wellness.
Yeah.
That was
yeah.
Caleb's.
Changed names a couple times, but yeah, Caleb and then, but
I think it was Florin Wellness, and then Luke Spot, the Purple Elephant that was in Alameda, came together.
Right.
And that's when Connected was formed.
Right. But before all that, I think probably a couple years before that, they were just buying weed, and they would, they'd buy 10, 20, whatever. So like Burn was like, yo, and then Burner was promoting it, and he had the good weed. It's not like it was before where he had like all these grows and he could like put all these sources. Like, so I had the quality, I had the genetics, I was part of the crew, I was trusted. So we were dumping. And then this is also a time where it kind of like a crossroad kind of start happening, right? Because Burner at that time, he was already making decent money, and I know he was getting Cookies clothing off the ground, and we can go into that a little bit, but that's kind of history a little bit. But he was getting Cookies off the ground, so Jigga and I were about our weed and growing and cultivating and grows and partners, and basically, we got the fire genetics, grow this, we're gonna take this, you take that that was the deals that we were doing. And so when we went down there, we were dumping weed. So a couple months went by, and then I had talked to Burner too, and I go, hey, everything cool, these guys, we think we might want to like go bigger with these guys. And he's like, yeah, it's good, these are my guys, like I got to deal with them, they're taking care of me. And they were bagging Burner out like at that time, I don't need to go into details, but Burner was happy. And so Jig and I went with the first gelato cuts. I was like, yo, I got this new heat. Like we did this testing, they knew about, I think we invited them. They were at the,
I remember.
Right.
Yep.
And so they were like, yeah. And I go, okay, cool. And they gave us a bag. It wasn't a big bag, and me and Jigga as a down payment. And Luke came to my house in the Sunset, and I actually recorded a video of it, but giving him the tray. And it was like, I gave him the 25, I gave him the 41, I gave him the 45, and I gave him the 33.
Larry Bird.
Yeah, and these were all ones that I didn't want to fuck with. This is the real story. Yeah. So like, I grew everything out, and those were all like the guava was like right. It yielded low. Terps were cool, but it just compared to everything else, it wasn't good. The 33 was a good one that I gave up, but it wasn't my number one pick, structure wise or anything wise.
The 33 to this day is the foulest concentrate.
Is it?
Bro, that's that jar that I gave you is the 33.
You said foulest? You mean like
just
in a good
foul
way?
In a good way, like a rotten, skunky, nasty. That's that 33. That's that one that I gave you when we were at the Dab Nation meeting. A good one. Anyway, sorry, I just interrupted you.
Yeah, but I gave that one away, and so like, they gave us a little bag, and then what happened was, this is like part of the bad side of it, and I've talked about it a bunch, but in reality, those cats got greedy, and they dogged me and Jigga. Burner made a little pivot, grabbed the ball, and kind of the history from there, and
yeah.
But to me, like, that saying in boxing where they protect yourself at all times. I'm a fighter too, so like I don't look at stuff like that as bad per se. You know what I mean? Because like in business, what I've learned is like, unless you're really like hurting someone or like physically robbing them and stuff, if I can outsmart you business wise, it's like, sorry, man. Like, and you could say you were going to do it or this and that, but there's also a certain timing where I think if Burn didn't do what he did at that time too, maybe it wouldn't have taken off for all of us.
It was a catalyst.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
And again, that's why I respect him, like, for what he did and how that he put that together. Like going back to like Burn, like the tagging us, the Cookie Fam, all that stuff. That made me and Flux and Jigga and Power, like people didn't know who the fuck we were. All of a sudden, everyone's like, "Oh, these guys are like." Burner's saying these guys are like
these are the breeders.
Yeah. And like breeders, first of all, I mean, let's face it, a lot of them aren't that cool. They're kind of like weirdos, and they were hidden in mountains and shit, and like no one was out being like, yo, I'm for the breeders, you know what I mean? And like, that's a lot of people don't even know that too. But like, I was one of the first guys like to really come out and be like, my name is Mario Guzman. I fucking grow weed and I fucking am proud of it. And that was a big thing for me and in my life. And because at that time, there was nothing, no guarantees. Even my lawyers, they're like, well, the fact that this could happen, I don't know, but I wouldn't. And
federally.
Yeah. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I gotta like stand up for what I believe in. And I talked to my lawyer. This sounds this sounds cliche a little bit, but I literally saw a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. And it was like, I'm probably gonna butcher this, but I've said it before, but it was like, our life ceases to exist when we stop fighting for things we believe in. You know what I mean? And I saw that like right at the pivotal time when I was like, fuck, dude, don't be a pussy. Like, you got to go. And that's when I was like, start putting my name in that. And then because I wanted people to like, and I started showing my face on Instagram and I started showing shit. Like, people weren't fucking doing that. And that's where the advocate in me kind of was born, because Martin and the guys from he was a real, I talk about Martin a lot because
I love Martin.
He was just that guy at that time. Like, I ain't never met anybody that was making videos about like at protests and interviewing Dennis Perone and selling them for $10 at his fucking dispensary. And I watched this thing and I was like, holy shit, like this is a whole thing. And then what I realized was like, all I have to do to be involved is just show up. Like, that's all I have to do. I got to show up.
Yeah.
Like, these places these guys go, and that's how I have personal relationships with all these people. That's how I have personal relationship with you, Addie. Like, that's how
I've always known you as Mario. That's funny because when you introduced yourself to me when we first met, I was like, "Hi, my name is Mario Guzman," and then it connected later on. I was like, "Oh, that's fucking Sherbinski." Like, it wasn't like you came at me as like, "Oh, I'm fucking Sherbinski." You know what I mean? Like, so it's no, that's always been interesting too, I think, and that's kind of, and it was that time when people were kind of still high.
Can we hold that subject? I'm gonna go grab a glass of water real quick.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, bro.
All right, guys. Take a big dab for me.
That was like when, you know what? At that period of time, it was like.
When did you guys meet? What year?
I think probably like 2010. It's like 2010. I met Mario. I'd known Burner from Sean and Flux and Jigga. I had known Burner through them because I had known kind of, that little crew. And then and then I met Mario. Burner brought Mario over to the lab. And then that's when I started to get to know Mario and kind of, we just clicked. Mario saw, I had the lab. So Mario was like, oh, this is where I could get the testing done and this and this and this. And it was like, true business, official kind of science for him to be able to take all of his ideas and sort of like, have something that you can attach to this strain and attach to this strain and attach to this strain. And it's, a short list of data, but here's something. And, and he was the one that was like, hey, I want to use you guys to do for this selection for gelato. This is the strain. I have all these different numbers. Let's test all the different ones. And we were like, fuck yeah, this is awesome. So Mario and Burner brought Mario and introduced him. And that was kind of like the first, when we had first actually kind of sort of, I think kind of met then and then at the selection, and then we started hanging out after that. But I always, me and Jai were always friends. So I'd always kind of hang out with Jigga and Flux. Mario was sort of always doing shit. Mario was like fucking hustling and running around. But yeah, those were good days. Like, that was like a crazy ass fucking time. Because at the same time too, Sour D was still floating around. OG was still floating around. The purple was still floating around, but then there was this new shit that was just fucking Bay Area insanity.
Hey, while we're talking about that though, you know what? Cookie Fam and that whole thing, as much as it had an influence on my success, like that, you being part of that was a big part. Like, and not to just take anything away from you, but just the reality is we were both there at that same time. And you were like into the concentrates heavy and stuff. And I think like they were too, like at that time, the holy
Flux,
water, you remember all that shit and like Flux. And I was always more on the growing, and like, honestly, the dabs and the shit those guys were taking, it was like driving me out of my mind. I literally like, I like, it wasn't my shit. I liked it, but then I stopped like at a certain point where I was like, I'm cool, man. Like the whole dab shit, it got just too much for me. But, and this is kind of tying into what I wanted to talk to you, but remember we were talking about why I wasn't doing concentrates and stuff. And, but mainly one thing, I'm a loner. That's one part. The other part is,
so me, Jai, and Flux ruined, we ruined concentrates for you because we dab so much.
No, it was, I think like nature sort of like not ruined it, but took me in a different direction, right?
Yeah.
But because, you know, just like anything, if like people gravitate to what they fuck with, like and their bodies can tolerate and they can handle, and listen.
Well, it was all BHO too. That was the other thing. It was all BHO, and you guys were more about like rolling a joint and sort of smoking flower, and we were all getting into like, well, fuck that. Let's blast this. Let's blast that. Let's blast that. And then taking that and turning it into other shit, you know, concentrating.
You brought up a good point. Is that part of that is that at that time, I was fucking ingesting such a high amount of butane. It was insane. Like, I remember a lot of the shit. It was so nasty and fucking had like, remember how it literally light on fire, some of this shit? Like, it was just so bad. So these early extracts too, like, did some damage to me. You know what I mean? I remember getting headaches. I remember like having bad effects from it. And so
I think Burner was the same way, and that's why he didn't. And now he's like coming into solventless dabbing and kind of getting into it. But I think a lot of cats at that time, it was a very sketchy fucking period of time, bro. It was, you know, and you guys had the genetics, and then we sort of had this like addiction to separation, and like, oh fuck, like let's run this, and this. So it was this weird, like me, Flux, and Jigga all kind of came together on the hash side. Mm-hmm. And you're right, you guys were more like breeding and flower stuff, and it just kind of,
I was making I was making so much bread with my grows. Like I didn't give a fuck. I would like give my trim away, and I didn't give a fuck. Like, and I definitely wasn't using any of my bud for extracts because, and a lot of these guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but they had like greenhouse homies that were growing. Like there was ways that they could extract that was like made more sense. And frankly, I mean, I'll just say it like this. My weed was good enough to where I was getting top dollar. It didn't make sense to do any concentrates at that time. When I did concentrates, it was more like, okay, I'm going to lose money because I just want to do this and have it to like flex.
You want to see what it's going to do. I think that was like right around the time when I introduced Jigga to Ned. And then that's when Jigga and Burner came back together on that Ned deal. Remember?
No, because this is part of where like I went on my own path, because what was happening was it was a lot of these conversations, like things were getting tense between me and Jai. I look at it, I always like, it just made me remember, it was like, we were like Guns N' Roses, right? But you know, the relationship between Slash and fucking Axl, it wasn't good, right? They were dope, right? And together they were like sick, but like their relationship wasn't good. And so like bands break up, shit breaks up. And so like there was, at that time, we didn't know, we were like, dude, we come from nothing. Jigga comes from nothing. He grew up really without, so did I. And like just the idea, he knew he had kind of a lottery ticket, right? He knew that. And he was protecting it like viciously, and which is absolutely, which is totally justified, right? But we were all fighting for this piece of cheese. Burner, Flux, Jigga, me, Power, like everybody was like, we're all bosses. Yeah, we're all bosses, and we all deserve the big piece of cheese. But it's like, to me, it was like, I saw how Burner was going to end up with the biggest piece of cheese, and because it was always kind of like, it was just, he had he had the influence, he had the right pieces, and he could easily take what he needed, like for his success, you know. And
well, the clothing brand was alive. The clothing brand was alive and running. Connected was pumping the genetics, the cookies genetics out heavy.
And that's right when they booted, and then that's right when they fucking booted me and Jigga out and said, oh, we were going to do a dispensary with you and call it the bakery. We're going to call it Cookies now. And we can't fuck with you because, and we can't buy any of your weed anymore, which was part of the deal, because we're growing it now. And I sat there and I remember being in the office with those guys and I was scratching my head and I was going, what?
Yeah.
Like, I was like,
It
all right,
went
cool,
backward.
homie. I go,
Yeah.
cool, homie. And I go, you know, I'm going to make one phone call and all this weed is going to be gone. You're fine with that, right? And he goes, oh. And then they kind of whispered in each other's ear, Luke and Nate. And they're like, well, we don't want to stop you from making your money. And I looked at him, I go, motherfucker, what? And I was like, okay. I was like, these guys are fucking turds. I go, all right, this is basically getting like to another, this is elevating to another level. Like who am I going to have to call right now? Like that. But then I was like, you know what? These guys are turds. They're not good businessmen. They're not honorable people. So what am I going to do? And so there was a lot of pieces and moving parts at that time, including Burner, who was partners with these guys. So now my partner kind of becomes and there was a lot going on. And I was fighting along with Jigga for us to get a bag that they were promising us that they weren't paying. And really when it came down to it, like put it this way, a lot of this shit and what I saw from the people involved at that time is why when I decided there was no fucking way I could ever be in business with these people, right? Any of them. And so that's kind of led to me. Again, I'm always like a fair play guy. Like, okay, you're making plays. I'm over here. I'm not going to sit and cry. I'm going to go make my own play. I'm going to go do something. And that's how Sherbinskis was started, right? And I remember my first investor and they were like, no one was giving out $1 million checks and shit at this time. And somebody was like, you know, I found an investor. We put it together. I was like, yo, I offered it to Jigga. He goes, I don't believe in this tribal shit. I don't believe you're not going to get licensed. This is like, I don't believe in it. He goes, so I'm not supporting you. I go, all right, bro, but this is what I want to do. And they got a bag and you haven't offered me shit. And part of the thing too was like, hey, bro, you're Cookie Fam. But there was no fam in Cookie Fam. You know what I mean? It was like
you weren't even Cookie Fam, but you weren't even getting crumbs.
Yeah, I mean, look, nobody was eating big yet. There was like what, one cookie dispensary? Like there wasn't any. It was just the very beginning. No one was really getting breaded out. But as men, we all were like, okay, I'm putting in work. Like if you work at your company, Addison, for 3 or 4 years, what would you expect?
I remember,
Growth, right? Like you want to growth, your ownership, something. And so
it takes 6 years. You know?
Yeah. And what the end of it was when I started hearing from people that were like fans of mine or people, and they'd be like, yeah, that meeting was sick, man. Sorry you weren't there. And I'd be like, what meeting? Oh, we just met with Burner and Flux and we met with Jigga and they said that you couldn't make it. And it was shit like that. And I was like, oh, really? And that happened like 2 or 3 or 4 times. And it was apparent that I wouldn't be part of that moving forward. So, you know, I went to my investor and I said, hey, Cookies is out, but you know, I'm Mr. Sherbinski. I have a concept. It's called Sherbinskis. You know, what do you think? And it's like, picture like a little Jewish deli in New York that everybody wants to go and get their favorite sandwich at. And it's very old school and traditional. And this, you know, they're like, we love it. And they cut me a check for $1 million. And I used that money to start my grow out in with the tribal community, with the Pomo Indians in Mendocino. And I'm proud that I was one of the first people to be licensed in the state of California with the tribe. And we worked and we lobbied, and that's something that we did. And, you know, I'm not working out there anymore. And really what it came down to was we had an outdoor grow there. We had greenhouses there, but with the pricing last year and what happened and where we're at, unfortunately, like if we crushed it and yielded our biggest yield that we possibly can, we lose like $1.5 million. And so it was like, okay, we can't do this anymore. So, you know, we made a lot of improvements. Like the tribe has the land, they have the license. Like I'm proud that we're able to do that and grow with them for, I think it was 6 years I was out there. But
we established the brand too. That's a great pop off. That's what's awesome about it.
But part of what was always tough too, and full circle why now is like a lot of the money I brought in, I never had like the grow that I wanted. I never had like all my genetics in one place. I always have like a ton of bachi or a ton of mochi, or they only wanted to grow those strains because it yielded the most. And I was like, what about my sherbet? What about my sherbet? And it was like, they didn't want to grow the sherbet because of the yield. And so, and part of the bad management and executive team that I formerly had was a lot of smoke and mirrors. Put it this way, when the brand was in the early days, when I was really the only one with gelato, motherfuckers on a phone call be like, yo, I need $500,000. I'm going to send you a fucking sheet right now. Send me the money in my bank account, like on a convertible note. And that money would be there in an hour. that's how it was, just like crazy, and it was being mismanaged. And so part of what I talk about a lot now with people, especially a lot of the minority work I do in the social equity space, is like educating people on a lot of those you know predatory lending techniques and what happened to me. And fortunately I still have my brand, but fuck, it's rough out there, as everybody knows, and like what's happened to our pricing this last year and everything. But I think I've definitely learned enough that all my next moves, I've learned what to do and what not to do, but also to be able to educate other people, even like, man, I'll just, even Masonic, he randomly called me like a month ago, and he was like, yo, man, can I get your opinion on something? And this is what's going on with me. And I was like, so stoked that he actually called me, but just to be able to tell him what it fucking actually is. And he was like, thanks, homie, that's all I needed. And it's like, shit like that. Like if I can do that to people, and I'm not sitting there saying I'm the victim or anything, I'm winning. Like I'm not tripping, but I could have done a lot better if someone would have been sharing with me, like, no, don't take that, and don't do this. And
that's you gotta feel that. Like in cannabis, there's some big ones, like Steep Hill was like fucking 9 years of my life or some crazy shit. That company sold for $36 million. I got $1,000.
What?
From a fucking $36 million company. It eventually sold, and all these but you learn, you learn. You just learn that, like, oh, okay, well,
here's to that lesson, Addy. Shout out to
Yes.
Sam. Shout out to Carta. Shout out to the Focus.
Well, the real benefit to all that is that you get a great lesson from it, and you learn, and you can teach other people. And the new deals that you put together, the new shit that you put life to, you correct those bad things by building stronger fucking partnerships, stronger businesses, and then just being courageous and making your business go. And that's what you've done. You've kind of taken that and fucking hammered. And I got you calling me up now about New York projects and other projects and California projects. And so it's like, you've definitely pivoted, like Barry Sanders with the fucking spin out of the hole. And that's really what it takes in this business. But then you're also like teaching other people and helping other people, spitting that game and keeping it going and having that sort of love after dealing with that whole situation and that shift. Like, this is what was happening at this time. It was a major shift in the whole direction of where everybody was going. Mario left, did his thing. Burner actually ended up having a falling out, I think, with Luke and those guys, right? There was a parting of ways with the Cookies brand and Connected.
I mean, can I keep 1,000? Who hasn't Burner had a falling out with? Love you, Bird. Love you.
Well, man, like, and then you know what it is now. I think Burner's image and everything that Burner does is so big at this point that, like, I don't expect a text back, and I don't even think I have Burner's number anymore at this point. You know what I mean? Which is like,
I do.
Whatever.
We talk. We rap. Yeah. I went and saw him when he was sick. Like, there's certain things that, like, I'm always gonna love the guy and have respect for him.
Yeah.
Like, and it's during those times when I kind of knew that too. I'm just that kind of dude, bro. I'm not a hater. Like, if it's a business thing and it's a money thing, like that's business and shit, man. Like, if you can do better than me or if you can do well, like I encourage that, So
hey,
like,
if Burner needed something from me, I'm sure I'd have his number.
Yeah, man. I mean, with all those guys, Jigga, like, look, Jigga and I had beef for years, bro. Like, and we can get into that. But just recently, last year we talked and we worked it all out like men. And it was just it was beautiful, bro. Like, it was just, it choked me up. It was just like, fuck, man. Like, when you go through shit that are your homies, and then when shit busts up and you're just over some money or some fucking bullshit deal shit, it hurts. Cause you're like, you know what? Yeah. That's like, it's fucking business. But like, somehow, and especially back in the day, man, when we were all fighting for the cheese and no one even knew who was, even if we asked Burner, what's it going to be like? How are we all going to eat? He didn't have the answers. He was just like, the bag really hasn't got here yet. We don't know how. And then you got 5 bosses that all deserve what Burner, all of us deserve that, whatever success, right?
Yeah.
And then how do you decide who gets what? And that's what I was like, I'm out. Like wish you the best. But look at now. Powers has got a dispensary. Jigga's, Jigga's happy. He's doing his thing. And Burner's successful. Everyone's successful, and like
Everyone.
Sean, let's talk about Sean. Like we talked about that, like the missing Cookie fam member, the guy that doesn't get talked about as much. But part of that is kind of the person like Sean is, and Sean is flux capacitor, SF flux capacitor. He was like part of the original Cookie fam, the people that we were promoting at that time when I was part of Cookie fam for what it was. He was part of it, and he was always in like, look, Sean, he put up the money for the spot. That what's funny is now this spot where we actually did the breeding and like is now Elefante's facility. It's a licensed cannabis facility. Shout out Elefante, which is a funny thing. But
that's dope.
Sean put up like fucking 70 bands, 80. He put up a lot of money for the lease and the bills. And Jigga built like this fucking like Frankenstein like breeding facility down there. It was like trap doors and this, that, and sheets that went over. And it was like, it was not the perfect setup, but that's where he reversed the sherbet and the cookies. And that's where we got that. And he did a bunch of other shit, but that's where he got that. And then I had a spot in Sac at the time. And it was right around when we did the High Times, when we did the Cookie Fam High Time story. And talked about like Girl Scout cookie and stuff like that. And none of that had been before that. Like there was no High Time story. High Times didn't even know who Cookie Fam was. So, I mean, I don't know how else to say that Sean and me and all of us were there from the very beginning, but that's what it was. And so at that spot, we pollinated. He took both pollen and put it on, cookies and sherbet. And the sherbet didn't the sherbet pollen onto the cookies and the cookies back to the pollen, but that's where the gelato came from. And so those seeds got taken and brought back to San Francisco and popped, into different facilities and shit. But that was that was the history part of it, man. That was what was so fun, like seeing just the bigger picture to kind of like scope out, like what we talk about all the details of it and stuff, but man, I'll just tell you the special part is like what I saw happen like in the world and culturally. And like shit, like when I would fly over to Spain and I'm just this kid from Sac that moved to the Bay and like, who the fuck am I? And I'm like in Spain and I'm at a coffee shop and someone's like talking about Sherbinski behind me and shit like that. And talking about, oh, it's my favorite brand and shit like that, which is like, what the fuck? And like, that was the kind of shit that started happening and more and more and more where I'd go. And like, even now, dude, like I'm not a rapper. I'm not out there doing videos and shit. I've had some exposure, but I go to New York. I go to these different places. It's just like, yo, what's up, dog? Respect. And I'm like, I'm humbled by it. I'm already a humble person, but like, I'm completely humbled by it. And so I give that respect back to everybody that gives it to me. Not everybody does, and I don't ask for it, but I feel just like New York has like big up to New York, man. I've been spending time out there. I swear, like the sad thing is, like I get a lot more love out in New York than I do in like my home state. You know, it's like it's crazy.
Before we jump off to that, I just wanted to say that about the beef, about the whole end of everything, and the switch over. What I've noticed, just personally with my own relationships with everybody, is that everybody's moved on. Everybody's squashed the beef. Yeah. Everyone's like adult. Everyone's like dads now, kind of looking at each other and being like, okay, player, that's like the respect's there. You know, I mean, like I said, I don't have Burner's number, but if I saw Burner, it's all love and everyone's all, got their own success now and doing their own sort of things and kind of,
100%.
And I think all that's been crushed and all that beef's been pushed away because now everybody has they've built their own stuff to be able to stand on, but they have that history that also enhances what they've built. And that's, I'm not Cookie fam per se or part of like that crew, but having known everybody and sort of know the details of it because I was friends with people, it is definitely like, nice to see everybody at this point all, I saw Caleb and said, how's it going? And I speak to Luke sometimes, and everybody's everyone's too successful to be mad at each other. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, I'm probably the least successful one out of everybody that's being mentioned right now. and I'm happy.
Certain things can be forgiven, but not forgotten, my friend. That's what I live by.
Well, like you said too, it doesn't mean we're in business together. Like some of us are, but
But when it comes to Kenny, when it comes to Sean, when it comes to Jigga, when it comes to Burner, those guys are always gonna have a special place in my heart. Like, we don't hang out, we don't send Christmas cards, but like, I'll call him anytime for any reason. If I'm like, yo, Jig, I just saw this. Oh, this, I'll call him. I'll be whatever. But I think the history there, like, again, like, this part of why we're all doing our own thing, and it is good, and I'm excited. And I think as we get older too, more of who we are and what we're actually doing in this industry is going to expose itself, right?
Yeah.
And because I think, like, even when you're a young kid, right, you running out of the gates real fast, and it's like, yo, we're getting older, but we still got decades, motherfucker. I ain't giving up. And for me, what that is like me doing like a gut check and being like, well, who the fuck is Mario Guzman? Fuck Sherbinskis. Like, who is Mario Guzman? Who am I in life, in this whole, my mushroom journeys? I did a lot of tapping in last year, a lot of plant medicine. And really what came up for me is like the work that I'm doing, the seeds that I'm giving to my friends, who those friends are, right? Like how they care for those seeds, what they're going to do with that, like not caring and being like, oh, don't take my shit. It's like, you know what I mean? Like,
put it out.
Boom. Yeah. Like as if it was my last days. You know what I mean? Like, yo, what do I got? Boom. Take this shit. Like, because who's going to do it? My homie, he's going to go through my seeds and know what's what. Like, I got to start quarterbacking shit. Like, yo, and this kind of leads into, this is the future for me. This is like all the history, right? And why there's no hate, not even a fucking hair of hate in my heart, because like all of that is part of what made all of us who we are, really, and like what drives us. And so, but full circle to where we're at now, is just these genetics, right? And what I've realized is like, cool, I've been in the shadows the last 2-3 years, just breeding and working with people and learning. And I've had a chance to work and sit with, some of the brightest minds in cannabis, like in Spain, and people that like I highly respect, using sophisticated ass equipment and explain to me why it matters and what they test for and that kind of shit. That just, getting into working with guys like Abstracts and, getting papers published. And, last year, my name was on a first published paper about our compounds that we found and defining the gas factor and what the compounds are that actually create that smell. And so it's a published fucking paper. And so things like that I'm contributing and I want to give back based on like research with the genetics that I created are things now that I'm really focused on creating IP around those scents, like the terpene profiles, which, shout out to Max and Jack and Kevin and the whole team at Abstracts. And we've been, 4 years ago, those guys put up, I think $1 million or more, a couple $1 million of their own money to create a facility that's licensed in the state of California to do research on this topic. And with everybody else was like, oh, when can we start running? And when can we get pools? And those guys were like losing money to double down on the research that they were doing on these plants. And so I fucked with that tough. And I was like, yeah, man, like fuck with me. And so he's given a lot to like the Herrera family and also to like guys like Josh D. And, Josh D is also on that paper with me that got published. So doing things like that in association with genetics and figuring out the seed game, figuring out where the seeds kind of fall in and like where the value is, creating really good relationships with other breeders that have created like a lot of their work and lineage with my genetics and that are fucking crushing it and are super cool people. And they're actually like honored to be like working with me and feel like it's an actual, like a legacy, part of their legacy that we work together. Right. And like, which is fucking unreal. So I'm experiencing a lot of that like this year for the first time, where it actually makes sense now too, where I could be like, before I'd be like, that's not my fucking bacho, fuck you or something, right? Like 5 years ago. Now I'm like, okay, all right, no one's denying that maybe you have something in there. Let me see what it looks like. And then it's just it's no flex, it's not no ego shit, it's no weirdo shit. It's just like it's honor. It's like real shit. And everybody can have my shit on your shelf. You could have this, but when I'm there and when I'm working with them and we're doing shit, it's like the people that respect that, it's pretty dope. And you know, and I'm also giving them mad respect and helping and giving them new genetics, and those are the kind of relationships that I'm been experiencing and been loving like recently. And there's a lot of people that need help. You know, there's a lot of that. There's also a lot of people that can appreciate like a one-on-one experience like this, where I can come in and I have my own brand and I know what they're going through and I know what they need. I have that experience and I'm operating in a regular, I'm not just coming in as some guy with some beans, and I can really understand like what it means for them, for their yield to go up, you know, a quarter pound of fucking light, or what it means for them for their terpene profiles or THC to go from 18 to 25. And so we can really work closely with them. So it's been amazing. And I've been, you know, it's really been a way that my model now, especially in California, is I can go into the people that are still alive, they need help. They're looking for a strategic advantage and what I can do. And please contact me, guys. If you're licensed in the state of California, and you know, if you need genetics, and what the model that we're doing is, we can provide you with genetics. Because I'll go to a lot of these greenhouses that are fucking really well ran, and I won't name the genetics, but it's these random ass strains that are just like, what? Like they'll show me 10 things and like 2 of them are like, well, this is the Sherbert biscotti, and that's like their best one. You know what I mean? And like everything else is like cheese fudge and cat's butt and fucking, I'm like, what is all this shit? Like, and it's just like, well, and it's like doesn't have no chirps. It doesn't, and the only one is like this Sherbert biscotti cross they got. And I'm like, why can't I just give you, run it? You know what I mean? And then you can sell some. I'll take what I need for my brand. We'll broker some, you know, like everything is like, and they're like, oh, that sounds dope. And it's just, that's really what it is. Now also, Addison, tying you in is like, now that's coming in to play with also these large scale genetics and these seeds that we're doing, these pheno hunts, guys like Preferred Gardens, guys like, you know, Christian from Finest, no longer with Finest, but Christian, you know, guys like that are really doing it. Like, let's find it, let's wash it, let's see what comes out, fuck the rest, keep the best. You know what I'm saying? Yep. And like, I'm super stoked to be working with you, and our history and our friendship we're building. And just, when I was down, you held me up. When you were down, I fuck with like men that like have that, you know what I mean? We're working out, we're strong, we're not weak, you know, like, you know, wolves, not sheep, you know what I'm saying? And like, that's
camaraderie.
Like, yeah, in a real positive way. And I think the industry needs that. And I that's what I love about your company. And this isn't me giving you like, this isn't paid advertisement from 800 Pound Mantra, by the way. This is me seeing a guy that kind of went through something that even I'm going through, you know, and instead of sitting and fucking going to a fetal position and being all bummed out, it's like, okay, well, how do I learn from this? How do I innovate? How do I pivot? How do I disrupt and do something? And this is like, not only like big up on Addison, but other people that are experiencing shit in the industry right now. When I'm going to get my stoner hat off and put my business hat on now. And it's like, right now, what you have to do is, it's all about alliances. It's all about, if you need to merge with a certain company that has all the things that you don't have and that you don't really think you're going to raise the money to get, because raising money right now, like, good luck. Like, you know, it's not easy to get any money. Like I mean, a lot of people could argue we're heading into a recession. You know, the cannabis industry has been, you know, year after year, like losing money. And like, you can't get the money that you once could so easily, like not even the best of companies. So
you need better ideas, and you need strategic partnerships that make sense. Otherwise you get gobbled, you know. It's like, it's true.
Yeah. And then that's why I'm really interested in like finding now some of the genetics too, like all the original. What I'm trying to do with Sherbinskis is take all the original lineup, Sherbert. So the ones that I kept, that I became my Thrifties flavors, my Baskin Robbins, was the Baccio, the acai, the mochi, the sherbet, and fuck, what am I missing? I think that's it. But in the Jello. And so that's been my lineup. So everything I'm breeding with, I'm just finding a good donor, and then I'm hitting basically all of those, and then also other things that I've pheno hunted that I like, that friends or other breeders, like things that I kept or they've given to me, or these other breeders that are just giving me a lot of heat, their cuts. I'm hitting it, like, you know, like we did a lemon tree one, that is the one that we're doing a big one on that. I hit like 15 different things with this real kind of pledgy cut that I got from HSO, and it just was super greasy, pledgy. And one of the best concentrates I ever had was a lemon tree to a sunset sherbet, which was just blew my mind, like the way it tasted. One of my favorite like terpene like profiles. I think you probably got that sitting somewhere in your stash, Addy. But
well,
you referenced OG that you got from HSO, a Mandelbrot OG. Is that a Royal Kush or is that something else?
I think the Royal Kush, the one thing I know, it's a Mandelbrot, and I think it's, I think he told me it's like a 3-way OG.
Okay.
I can get the details on that from Eric, but I haven't really published anything on that. So I just call him my Mandelbrot OG, but I know he was like, he told me it was like a combination. I don't know if it's I want to say the Three Kings or something like that or something. I'd have to look it up. Something with I'd have to look it up. I might be misquoting, but yeah, just a really, I've got a bunch of those that I'm stirring around too, but I've just kept those kind of in the background. I haven't really released any of those, but some of the things that
is there a plan to have a solventless line and a flower line, or are you going to breed in a certain direction and identify different phenotypes within that line that will be positive or work well for flower and solventless?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the plan. And that's what I've been working with Addison on, is kind of the next phase of like, okay, we're going to take this amount of what you're growing, we're going to test it, we're going to see how it pulls, and I'm just really relying on him. And again, this goes into what I was talking about, is like, we have a long-standing relationship. This is totally aside from the show and everything, guys. So just so you understand, this is what I'm talking about. Who are your friends? Who do you have relationships with? And no, but real talk though. And then rely on what they're doing, what their expertise is at, you know? And I think this is key to kind of industry, like staying in the industry, because understanding even like the percentages on like what we need, like what qualifies as a good washer, right? What do we need to do? And helping me identify that with all the genetics that I'm breeding, and having good growers that are, you know, well respected in the industry that are going to contribute to that. And I think it's not going to be up to me. It's just like, it's going to be up to what, you know, what's good. You know, it's there. The genetics are there. It's just a matter of finding it. And so
one of my favorite rosins right now is that Gelato 33. That one that Rosenbaron's doing, that Gelato 33 is one of the craziest tasting, just, you know, because it just has so much profile to it. Your stuff, when you get it with the right stuff or put it with the right stuff, it has such an iconic profile that so many people are used to. Like, one of my favorites of your stuff in flower is mochi. Fucking such a fucking wonderful, like, soil, gassy, kind of beautiful flavor and beautiful flower. And I think it's like, what got me excited about the whole thing with you and I is that, like, it's awesome to be able to, like, look at or make that connection between the breeder and what the breeder's doing and what they're thinking of and what they got going on, and then putting them into the solventless hash production space and saying, hey, let's take a look at these couple things, because it's a whole other fucking world. And you know, then you get into a genetic licensing deal on, you know, fresh frozen sales or something, and now your shit's in the washrooms. You got popularity on both sides, and you're able to diversify the offering that your company has, because now you have straight flower seed, you have production seed for, you know, solventless production, other things, and you're in both fucking worlds. And those are the spaces. And now you add Web3, add the other shit for authentication and validation of authentics and all these different things that you can do that are like just the future of what can be done. And that's like our conversations have always kind of that's kind of where we've talked about, and it's exciting shit. Like it really is. Like but I think it's kind of crazy how right now with everything that's going on in hash, everything, my favorite hash is that fucking gelato. That's crazy.
Is there a small award that I can? Thank you.
Something. It's some hash. Like, come to my house, I'll give you some hash.
Finally accept.
Sure.
No, I mean, honestly, dude, when I go to your house, you literally, it's fucking retarded. Like, imagine if you were a wine guy and you walked into like this wine cellar that just like shit your pants. Like, that's basically Addie's fucking hash collection. It's insane. He's got the big jars. He's got the small jars. He's got the cup winners. He's got the fucking keepers. He's got the fucking losers. It's insane. But I love that because, like, if you're able to say that, and obviously, bro, you smoke on the best of the best, like, that means a lot, you know? But that's what also gives me hope is, like, I'm sitting there going back, like, well, I haven't really released anything in fucking 5 years, 6 years, and I'm still selling my shit. People still want the original. And I'm like, but everybody might not say it, but the stuff that's in there, it's really my gear. And like, that's the whole, go ahead.
I'll say right now what I said to you the other day. And on the hash side, on the solventless hash side, I think the move is to do, you know, what we mentioned, just kind of talked about, would be like a collab with Mace, where like and all you gotta do is give something to Big Mace, and Mace just goes nuts with it. And then using that as kind of a catalyst to then pop off and start doing some of the other stuff. And then we have pipeline, we have all these other things that we can use.
Me and Mace have been fucking around for years on the down low. Like, and I know. Let me tell you how we met. Like, all right, so before no one knew who the fuck he was. He was just a kook that was like online, like posting weird shit. He hadn't really developed his brand. I don't know how long ago it was, but I want to say 3-4 years ago. It was really before he really got popular. And I got this crazy message on Instagram, and it was like, oh, this flower was dry or some shit, like, right? He was like, bitch. He's like, I bought this 8th. I expected more. Like, you let me down, sure, for something. And I was like, and at that time, I can't do it as much, but I was like, I still, if I get a complaint on Instagram, I always try to like handle it. And at that time, people were known, like, I would just pull up on the corner and give people like a bag of weed. They'd be like, what the fuck, Sherb? And it would like blow their mind, because I wanted these, whenever anything bad happened, I went out of my way to make sure that these people were happy. And so I didn't know who the fuck he was. He was just like somebody acting weird. Right. Which I've learned to love that about him. But
that's what I love about him.
Yeah, me too. He's just no fucks. Like, I love it. I'm like, dude, I love that about you. And I remember I was with one of my HA homies and fucking having a meeting. He pulled up on me, and I had like some merch, and I had like he bought an 8th. I think I had like a half ounce or a quarter ounce. I don't know what I gave him. But I remember meeting him, and I was like, yo, bro, sorry, man. Wish you the best, like, here. And we shook hands, and, you know, he's very honoring. He was like, all right. It was like, in his mind, it was like, it was cool, you know? And I was like, I had done right by him.
Right. Yeah.
And he had realized, like, I was real. I wasn't just some fucking dork Hollywood kid, you know? And he was like, so we started, like, you know, and then when I would see him do his shit, I was like, yeah, bro, it's fire. And, you know, just even him opening his shop on Fairfax, I think it's fucking, I love it. It's honestly makes me feel good, because I look at it like with my shop and all the bullshit and headaches I have, being able doing that deal was like, and what it takes, staffing, licensing, taxes, and then he's able to have his shop and pops up. To me, it's almost like legacy, fucking like, you know, and the new work, and I'm like, to me, even though that's my shop, like, I'm right in the middle. I go and hang out with him. I'll smoke a joint. I love what he's doing. I love what he's doing, and I'm a huge fan and supporter. But also, just you know, he's down there in Mexico right now, and he lost his grandfather last year. I was down in Mexico. I lost my grandfather. Like, our families come from a lot of the same shit. Like, pretty much nothing. Like, flipping tortillas and shit in the backyard. So I got a lot of love for him. So we definitely, I know we've already got some things in the works, but yeah, the right collabs, the right people doing the work, and what's nice is these farms now are just completely ready to be like, yo, take it, run it. Before it was more, I think a lot of these, they're seeing the value in finding these things. And, it's a layup for me because I want to buy the genetics that I want to grow, that I want to keep. I'm going to give one or two to them, and they're able to go and promote that, sell it in bulk, whatever they want. And I just get first right of refusal, and so it's been working nice. But a lot of these partnerships just started, and so like the stuff's being grown now. We're going to be seeing some of this first stuff pulled in like a month. So I know in Oregon where I'm doing a big old fucking like hunt there with all these genetics. So and it's looking phenomenal. I'm about 3 weeks away up there, so excited to start seeing some stuff come down. So my next thing I'm doing now is I took from Ian, I got the Emerald Cup winner, the headset, they also, I call it headset, but they call it it's the headband and the Sunset Sherbert.
Yep.
I think there's another name for it. But anyways, that motherfucker is a heater and like real special. So I reversed that and I put that on to like all the original gelatos, sherbet, and then like all the other keeper stuff. And like I got some stuff I pheno hunted with Mason. I put that in there, and like there's all this different stuff that I put in there. And those are going to be beans that I release, and those are also going to be beans that like, so I'm creating, like I'm doing the work now on the lemon stuff, and then I'll have all the photos and I'll have all the data, and then I want to share some of those genetics as and then also the next one will be the headset, and I think I love the headband profile. It reminds me of being in high school. It reminds me of being young. It reminds me of just when I think of dank, it's like that's the smell. Like even more so of like OG. When I smell like this headband, it's just it just brings back to a special place. So that one is going to be amazing, and those seeds are being made right now. So that's kind of the next thing. And then I'm sitting on like 200,000, 300,000 seeds, all different types of varieties, things that I've done over the last 2 years. And I'm just so on to what I'm doing now that I want to find like some farms or some things to put those things to. But, I'm not really looking at seed sales as a big money source or anything like that. It's just about finding like new stuff.
Yeah, as someone who's looked through a tremendous population of seeds over the years, is there like a specific way that you like to do it, or pheno hunt? Do you like to sift outside first and then bring them inside, or inside first and take them outside? Is there a SOP that you've developed over the years for pheno hunting?
Yeah, I like to do them outside first or in greenhouse, because I feel like if they don't perform in those environments, if they don't look good in those environments, or rather if they do, right? If they look like indoor in those environments, when you bring them indoor, it's only going to be better. When you do it indoors and you do it the opposite way, it's not always the case. So just to make sure that you're going to have the aesthetics are going to look the same, then I like doing it in greenhouse. And I just think greenhouse is more cost efficient, especially if you have lights and if it's in a good environment, you're going to see what the genetic's going to do, and you can produce really good flower and really good trichome production, and your cost is going to be a lot less. And now things are changing with like my new partners. And also want to announce that I have a partnership with Cam and Anna over at Cam, and so they have a 2100 light facility that she's opening up in Sacramento and bringing it back home to the city of trees. So I'm excited about just not having any issues anymore with any of the original genetics or any of our new stuff or any of the things we're bringing not being available to the state of California. So I'm really excited about that. That's not to be discounted in any way. So really, like, there's going to be a lot of things you're going to be seeing with the extractions, with all that, because along with having all these lights there's just going to be a lot of different things that we're going to need to diversify. And that's part of why I'm working with Addison and, relying on just the diversity of the team to like find the heat, find the right people to process it. What are the, brainstorm what products we're going to make. And so I'm excited about all that. I'm excited about showing like that I've done the work, you know, and just all the people when I first got in, and I was never even going to like peek my head out until I was like, man, I got work to do. Like, I don't know. And there's still so much I don't know. But what I do know is if you put a male and a female in a room and you leave them alone for long enough, they're going to fuck. And that's kind of how seeds get made. And like, if you can make it more complicated and you can, but in reality, it's not that complicated. Like, you know, and really what it comes down to is just kind of, there is some pieces you need to know, like when you pop the seeds and different mediums and taking care of them when they're little. But once they get past that little fucking, they're weeds. They're not going to stop growing as long as they have water and they've got light. And so from there, I have an advantage because now there's just so many good cultivators that just are welcoming me with open arms. And I just feel real fortunate to be able to go in there and it's all love. And, you know, I can be like, yo, take these, take that. And before I even know it, they're like, yo, check these out. I'm like, wow. So there's going to be a lot more of that. And to me, you know, like, this is what I'm going to be doing in the industry. I don't care what happens. I don't care who fucking goes, what happens, new, old. I'm going to be that guy, and I'm going to be doing exactly what I'm doing, what I'm talking about doing. Like, I don't know, for as many years as I want to, you know, because I don't have to break my back. I can make seeds, and there's so many good people that I'm finding now that are in it for the right reasons that I'm not looking over my shoulder anymore. It's really like, I'm that part of where the industry going is I'm actually really excited about, because there's just a lot of people that never should have been in the industry and that were actually ruining it, or like actually finding their way out. So yeah, man.
I think what you're referring to is like, as the industry matures and things consolidate, you know, as it moves forward and things consolidate, what happens is you start to see great manufacturers and great farmers and great distributors, and all, you know, they all fall into their place. You know, they may all want to be a brand, they may all want to be X, Y, or Z, but what they find is, or what we find as an industry, is they are really good operators in different fields that need brands. And then that's where, to have a brand right now and be able to look at the industry and figure out, well, you know what, I don't necessarily need, you know, all these things, all these other components to make my brand, my what I have here is brand recognition, to make that go. And that's such a big reality. You know, the brand is so important, but what's also important is these manufacturers, these operators, these farmers, these distributors, all these different components of the industry, they've all settled into their place. And now you're seeing sales teams, independent third-party sales teams, come in and either sell for the brand or the distributorship into and transported by the transporter. It's all kind of falling into place now as the industry matures and gets older. But it's the same thing with Grandiflora. You know, it's a brand that is a genetic database that's held by equity license or some sort of license in the industry. And then the smartest way for that brand to exist is to turn around and license those genetics and that brand to this farm, and they grow these genetics, and this farm grows these genetics, and then you have a distributorship or a manufacturing license. So when the product's done, you do a ROFR, right of first refusal, to buy it back, bag it, put it out as your brand. It's so crazy now how like the industry has matured to the point where it takes a village to really fucking make a brand pump. And you don't have to own all these other components. You just give them a piece because they stay in their lane and they're the best distributor, and they stay in their lane and they're the best, you know, dispensary chain for X or whatever. And it's like, it's really matured to that point now where, you know, California is a fucking monster. And once it goes national, it'll be even crazier. But to have a brand, to, you know, and have built your brand to the point that it is now, and to see California where it is, it doesn't surprise me to see that like your partnerships are more, I mean, your brand is built on strategic partnerships for that reason. You know what I mean? And that's the reality for a lot of brands, man. It's like, you know, you see Cookies pulling out of certain spaces. You see, you know, them selling 3 of their shops in this place you know, because the actual hand-to-hand over-the-counter business with a brand is totally different than the flower production component of a brand. And this, and you see Burner kind of pulling back and going more into media. You know, it's like all this shifting and all this moving around. And what is a brand? Well, it's those words and that color. And you know, what else does it come to it? And that's what I love now in California. And to see your brand and to see you in California, but then I also see you in other states. You know, I and I wanted to discuss it. I wanted to actually ask the question because I know there are people probably tuning in that were like, oh, Sherbinski, and they live in Michigan, and they want to be like, I want to see what he says because the home grow and all this shit. Like for any person, and I just want to be the first to say it because we are friends, any person who listens to your story and thinks that you would personally try to squash a home grower from being able to grow cannabis is just insane to me. So I wanted to bring it up and ask you about your partnership in Michigan and how that sort of turned into and how that turned into this controversy that's in Michigan, where I had people coming to me being like, oh, Mario, you know, your buddy Sherbinski's not for the home grow. And I'm like, wait a minute, Mario has a licensing deal and a partnership with an existing company. And whatever they might be doing, that shouldn't reflect on Mario. But I just want to give you an opportunity to first outline it and sort of address that odd situation in Michigan that we both discussed before.
Yeah, it's a Michigan has been an interesting state, right? I mean, because I work with people like Tiki, you know, and I work with other people in that state like Fang and people that are doing dope shit, good people. But I also work with Common Citizen, right? And when I went and met them, toured their facility, they wanted genetics. One of our investors was, you know, setting that up. And as you guys know, like even when you bring genetics, it takes, or, you know, the breeding process there for their to get and to grow and cultivate, this shit takes 6 months, a year. So there's a long process. And during this time, I'm just focusing on getting the cultivation going. And about, I'd say a month or two after we started releasing product, and I went out there and I was like throwing high fives and excited about it, they came up with this, I think the MCMA or, you know, whatever it's called, I forget, but their little gang basically against, you know, basically the Chads, you know what I mean, came in full armor. And then I started getting messages like, you know, and basically what it was before the messages, really what this was about, and from what I understand, and the big argument that I get is that, and why people think I'm against a home grower, is because a lot of what they wrote and a lot of what they're attempting to do is basically shit that I do see, where it's like, oh, well, we don't want to do anything, but we want you to have testing, and we want you to kind of have to go through the same loopholes we have to go through. And I understand like the barriers that creates for like people like myself that were growing in my garage. And I understand like how people have business and they don't want to get tested and they don't want to have any regulations. And I also understand a lot more than I care to go further about that side of the industry. And so no one wants to take anybody's ability to eat away. But like, I think people forget, like I started in a garage and I got into this licensing deal, and there was any red flags for me and of the people, and it was about them cultivating so I can have my genetics to get to as many people as possible, which is why I created the brand. And so along that way, which includes contracts and includes lawyers and a lot of other things, what they wrote, I don't agree with. And the way they did it, I don't agree with. It was fucking shady. I'm still battling with those guys, and I'm battling with the home growers too. So in the end, like we could go round and round, but my hope is that instead of just like punching air and being mad about it, is I do want to be an agent of change. Like if I walk away, then I think that it does more bad than good, because this is still a business and I still want to operate in the state of Michigan, and I want to operate with people that are licensed and that can cultivate enough to distribute at an amount that makes sense for me to do a licensing deal. And it's not the fucking Too Light Terry that is going to give me that. But those are the guys that are out pounding their fists in the air that they're so mad. You know, there's other guys in there that are legacy guys in your state that got a lot of love for me and respect for me, and they have no problem with what's going on. And you know, if you guys were a fly on the wall in the meetings that I have with these guys and their corporate guys, it's just I'm schooling them. They don't get it. There's a lot that they're missing. But in a positive note, I think through a lot of pressure from guys like that are doing these shows and that are, you know, pounding their fists in the air, and also pressure from all sides, these guys realize that they have to do something. So I know they created a brand that 100% of the proceeds goes to like different social equity or education. You know, I don't know. I don't have my finger on exactly what programs they're going to, but we could discuss that further. But I know that they're taking actions to, in what I suggest in them is like, yo, if the problem with what you're doing is people are going to lose access, like if I'm putting like my MCBA hat on and like advocating, the problem with a lot of these things is people aren't going to have money for lawyers. They're not going to be able to be compliant. They're not going to be able to afford to keep growing and making the money they were. So what I'm telling them is that they need to put their money where their mouth is, and they need to create programs where they're paying for legal fees, they're paying for like free licensing. And so these are the things that you know I've directed them for. So what's being done exactly, I don't know exactly right now, but you know that's where we're at.
Yep, that's good. No, I know that there had always been like a lot of when I posted and was like, yeah, Mario's going to be on, I had people hit me from Michigan being like, oh, make sure you ask him, because it just seems like people have so much venom towards that subject for you know your association or your you know being associated with that group. And it was like I didn't even want to have to answer it myself. It's like, look, if you don't understand that, like a brand or somebody who's coming in, they're going to have partners that are doing something and they may not agree with them. So to put that on that brand or put that on the other person, it's not fair. And, you know, they don't understand what it's like to be as vulnerable as a brand is when it does select a partner and some things change, and then that's represents your brand in some way. So I wanted to give you the opportunity. And I think that's, you know.
Well, here's the other part. One of the biggest guys that was talking shit was this guy Berg that has this Medical Mondays or something show. Mm-hmm. And I got into it with this guy, right? And then as time, and the reason why I got into it was I understand his point of view, but I also had mine. And he kept on asking me to go on the show and talk about it. And to me, situations like that are like ambushes, and it's a lose-lose, you know? But the funny thing is like, as time passed by, this is the same guy that's like messaging me, apologizing and saying, hey man, please forgive me for like being a dick. And, you know, and coming at me that way. So all the people like, and he was the one coming the hardest. So I think, and maybe he's pissed off again. I don't know. But the reality is like, I'm a businessman too. Yeah, I'm a tree hugger and I'm down for all the garage growers. I was fucking one, but I'm not staying in a fucking garage. Okay, that's not my goal. That's not what the brand's goal. That's not what I think is positive for anybody. So
no, and you worked hard to get the fuck out of a garage.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna sit and justify that to a bunch of, like, frankly, a lot of these people, they're not engaging in intelligent conversation. They're just, so it's like I don't engage in a lot of that shit. I did with Berg because I thought he was like the one that was like leading the way, and I took some time to explain some things. But it's that's part of the reason why I won't go on the show. Just a lot of those people and their views, it's not in line with mine. So
yeah, I mean, sometimes haters are just people that want to be your friend and they don't know how to ask how. So they make.
Thank you for bringing that up, Addison. Appreciate you. And for all the people in Michigan, thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate you. And for all the people.
I mean, I wanted people to understand it from my standpoint and from, from what I knew about the situation. And I think a lot of people, it's their state and they love that place, and they don't understand or know you the way that I know you. And that's why I was like, oh, well, you got to give them the opportunity to definitely explain it. And people had asked for it. So I'm glad that you're able to kind of give them that understanding. So.
Yep.
Excellent.
Reach out to me. Anybody want to go at it? Hit me up.
I wanted to ask about your
in my DMs.
I wanted to ask about your partnership with Rohan Marley. I think that's a really cool project. I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's not really a partnership. I've been, have a relationship.
Project.
Yeah, I just have a relationship with him, and part of the breeding and what I think he was in California, and I think he was looking to launch here, but he ended up launching in Michigan, I believe. But I'm still working and breeding and really just showing him like work and in California, even finding the right like way to launch. I just really want to like, hey, I fuck with his family. I fuck with the legacy. I mean, it was like an honor to like just be through my boy Shaggy. Shout out to Shaggy, who really like is like family to Rohan, and just meeting the family and just wanting to knowing the history of kind of like how when they launched before, it just wasn't honorable to their name. And we just connected because I said, yo, I'd love to bring something that would bring honor. And he was like, we just connected on that. And Chloe, was working with him and other family members, and just like, that's what it is. But to me, it's not about business. It's not about deals or nothing. It's just kind of like, I'm going to show him some work. And if like he fucks with it, like, yo, you want to grow to Michigan, just kind of like work out things that make sense. Yeah.
I see you hitting that card. I know you had a brief history with concentrates and then kind of shied away from them for a minute. Have you recently got back into concentrates, or has that been a thing for the last couple of years?
Yeah, I've just been, I'm like a joint guy. I love my like rolling a joint. I'm old school, but I do want to smoke less like joints, just being more active and like getting more focused on my fitness. I think, and just, I'm 45 now. I think I just look at it just being a more healthy alternative and kind of adjusting, my intake for the high, where I just find myself using it a lot less and just taking like 1 or 2 dabs and I'm like good. And so I like that. And then also just recently just spending more time with Addison and just having access to better concentrates, to be honest with you. Because like even the stuff that comes into like the shop or whatever, like with my schedule and where I'm going, like even if I'm going to see Addison, I got to drive like an hour and I got to go see him. It's not like I can go and conveniently go and see and get things and product that like I trust. And then, most recently, I was introduced by Addison to Sam, and who created the product. And, I mean, we're looking at creating a Sherbinski, Carta collab right now we're working on. And so stoked about that. And I just think just naturally being, that papaya, I think kind of sparked like my love for concentrates again. And like he gave me a gram of that with my Carta and my focus. And I think I called Addison like 2 days later. I was like, bro, I need it. And I was like, please.
I'm working on a couple ounces right now. It's fucking that shit is so fire. It's just such an amazing cut.
He won the cup. He won the cup with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for Emerald Cup for the concentrate stuff for solventless. But what a great version of it though. They grabbed a really nice one, and I think they're about to put more of that out right now. So they got a huge demand for it. So I just talked to them. I'm trying to get us a couple ounces.
I see how it is. That's not like that's like good.
Oh man, I'll hit you up.
That shit's different. Yeah, I know you're gonna have some sort of fucking stash of it. So
got
probably better, probably easier to get it from you. No, but it's been nice and just having access to that, and again, just want to studying it more as like the new genetics and what we're going to be doing. And a lot of the cultivation partners I have, a lot of that is going to be going to, washing it and creating new products. Rosin, like one of the new products we're going to be dropping is a rosin vape So also working with, and we have a lot of farms that just come to us with all their product. And I mean, not just us, not even through my relationship with you, like all across our desk, you know, and the pricing is getting just better and better and better. And so, you know, with higher margins in the different manufactured goods, we're going to be able to, you know, offer, you know, different SKUs. The rosin vape is one thing I'm excited about, because I mean, I love live resin and it's great. And I know like it killed distillate, but I feel like live resin is just like after the rosin vapes and shit, like I don't even, it's just a different experience. So
Yeah. And I think the solventless experience, a lot of us feel this way, is that the solventless experience is the pinnacle way to actually experience any strain, because you get everything else out of the way and you just have that pure essence of the plant in this solventless format, and then bring in the whole glass culture, and now you've got this specific apparatus that pulls this amount of airflow, and then you get, you know, the nail, and you're like, you put all that together, and it may seem silly when you look at it from the outside. And that's what's great about a Carta. That's what's great about Puffco's new product. That's what's great about these things, that it minimizes someone's barrier of entry to start to get into concentrates and enjoy these solventless versions of things. But then when you get into it and you enjoy it and you start to turn that dial and get into, you know, the correct airflow of a pipe with the proper fucking nail, and then you heat it to the right temperature and hit it at the right time with the perfect size dab, and then cap it correctly and put all of that together, it opens up and unlocks a whole other flavor palette of that strain that even the breeder hasn't fucking tasted or seen. And I've had this happen where breeders are like, what the fuck? And you're like, oh yeah, this is because now you're hitting the lower boiling points where these terpenes are coming together. So I think a lot of us feel like the pinnacle consumption point on any strain is in solventless, and not all of them are viable. It's really great to kind of get to like see the bigger guys in the industry sort of that are flower guys now start to be like, well, what the fuck is this? Because it took me a long time, and you know, I was a big BHO head, and you know, it took Taylor and other friends kind of just giving me jars of rosin, and just like I do with you, I'm like, here, fucking, you know, these different things. And I think it's just it's great to kind of see and have that our friendship on that level too, where we're like, oh, you know, different things, and then to see you with the Carta, and then to see those sort of things.
hey, on that
happen,
note,
it's great.
on that note is like, what's cool is like, I'm late, but I don't feel like I'm late because I have the genetics that I've made, that now when I come to it, it's like, yo, like I'm not, it's not like I'm you know, it's a different kind of angle that I'm enjoying. And a lot of people have the genetics that are already kind of like, hey, this is my Sherbert, this is this. And it's nice to be able to, it just fits in, you know.
When you have those populations to go back to, like you can open up those and find those same flavor profiles. And as hashers, we don't care about the morphology, or we care about the morphology. We want it open and undesirable, more or less. And so when you look through that lens for a solventless maker, you're able to revisit those flavors and make those selections based on resin per square foot and not pounds per square foot. And that's what is really exciting, is to get, you know, the batchio that washes. I think that, you know, that to me is what's really exciting, is you've got the ability to
hash selection. Yeah. No, it's one of the more popular parts of the industry too. It's like, it's a huge growth sector for the solventless vape pen. It's a huge you know, one of the biggest other growth sectors again is like the pre-roll with rosin in it. So it's the donut. So it's a big part of the industry and where it's going. And I think the more that you see people enjoy it, that they get to try it, and it turns on their head. They're like, oh, this is like when I smell a fucking bag of weed, but I don't have to smoke fuck, I can hit a pen and it's just as clean and great. And that's what's awesome about the whole thing, is that you're kind of bringing this like real, you know, like when you said that when Jai walked you into the Louis Vuitton and was like, hey, this is kind of how we do this. It's like, if you really want to grab the pure essence of a plant, turn it into solventless, see if it washes and dab that shit at, 530 degrees or lower. And here you go. You'll see it. So it's cool. It's nice to have you like coming onto this side with us.
No, it's exciting. It's exciting because it's also a key. It's going to be a key part of like my business moving forward, and even looking at some of them that wash higher. And if I have the whole manufacturing side of my business where we can create different, manufactured goods based around and yield. And so we can turn that into good margins. Yep. I mean, right now, if you're going to stay alive in California, it's like, if you're not, it's all about whatever your margins are.
Yep.
So
you got to bring value and have solid margins. That's no question. So,
yeah. I think just part of also, with some of the resources I have now on the manufacturing side, it's like, it's also something I brought up before we started actually the show is like another part of a big reason why I like didn't, was not attracted to the concentrates because I had so many bad business deals. I had so many where I was giving them like my best shit and they were like, oh, this happened or that happened, or they would give me back like shit that was like, what? And it happened way too many times that, and that was never part of our business, right? I never teamed up with like an extraction artist and, it just all these guys were just like even more unreliable in my opinion than like growers and stuff. And growers were even like enough to deal with. Right. Yeah. And again, we were getting so much for our flower and our flower still demands a high price. So it just didn't make sense to take that. But again, now it's a different time, these different partners, like guys like Christian, guys like Preferred Gardens that are, going to grow like, and they're into the pheno hunting aspect of it. Then it's just, that's exciting. Even some of these bigger like facilities that I'm not even naming, but, some of the guys out in the valley that, cause we also broker and we purchase and we find good flower and, just supporting some of these other farms, and they are understanding like they're extracting a certain percentage of what they're harvesting. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, having those resources to be able to allocate large number of lights to looking through populations that could be worth nothing. That's power. That increases your chances of, and especially when you're looking through quality genetics, which your stock. Being able to allocate that space to forward-looking research. I know Addison preaches it all the time. The future is in genetics. So I think I'm really excited to see, the work you're doing, because I think if you look at the industry, especially in North America, it's very much in a downward spiral right now. And I wanted to ask you, looking at more established states, taking New York and a few of the newer states out of the equation, we're seeing a lot of issues in California, Colorado, up in Canada. What are your thoughts on these more established markets over the next 3 years? Do you think that it's going to be more of the same and batten down the hatches, or do you think that we're about to come out and start to see an upswing in some of these states?
I think it's more time to buckle down. The reality is, it's even if you look at outside of our industry, just there's a lot of things pointing into a recession coming, right? And that's gonna just inherently affect our industry. And so despite all of our struggles and the price going down, what's funny is everything else is going up in the world, especially in the States, but our price is going down. It's really funny. But I think look, right now it's coming down to like key partnerships, relationships, strategic partnerships, key pieces. Like, to speak to what Addison was talking about, is each person, like I always like look at business and corporate business like a football team, any sports team, right? Everybody's got their position, and if you're going to win a championship, everybody's got to be playing their position at its peak. And that's really what it is. And those different positions are the different parts of the supply chain, and all the way from like who's growing it, all the way down to the end piece delivering it and your end consumer. But yeah, I think, and not only that is like what I'm noticing is like the communication level between all those different aspects of the business has to be at like the highest level, because I think before you could sacrifice that, and maybe there was a couple bad people in in part of it that they didn't communicate that well and things like that, but now things like that, key little pieces, details, with all the, all the different parts of the business. Like I know for Sherbinski's, like, man, we're incredibly dialed now with, down to the penny. It hasn't always been like that because we haven't had to. But it's the way the business should be ran. And I mean, really up until last year, there's a lot of people in the industry. If you go and look at like their books and the way they operate the business, that shit was like not in order. Because a lot of the investors that I would talk to that would come in to be like, where in any other industry, they kind of be like, yo, show us your business. And it's like, okay, you have all the taxes, you have everything, your P&Ls, everything for like the last 3 years. In this industry, that's not always available. And so and that also is what made it increasingly hard to raise money. But just my operation, shout out to my CEO Steven, my CEO Daniel, Casey, my team, and they're amazing. Like in the last year, they've really like, I've seen what good operations like can do, and just in terms of like a lot less. Are you frozen on us there, Addy? There he is. But just in terms of your operations in California, what it takes to actually still be in the industry, and the amount of money through all the hits through COVID that all the businesses have had to take. It's like, I'm grateful that I'm in business, and it's been tough. Like, I'll be fully transparent. The industry, I've seen like people that I've been, came up in this industry with, like really that aren't around anymore. People that should be here and that it always did really well. They're not in the industry anymore. And so I'm empathetic to that. This industry, we built this industry, and I'm actually really disappointed with just where it's going, and because, a lot of the way that the laws were created and the taxes and everything that's been created, that we have to even with everything that was going on, and they could have given us a tax break. They didn't, and it's like, wow, do you really want us to not succeed? And so that there, I'm really like, a lot of that is tough. But again, like, I think it's people that are surviving, that are still here. Even like this could have been said a year ago, 2 years ago, when like a lot of the shit that people have been going through the industry, there's people that lost their business years ago. But just to shorten it up, really where I'm going is, yeah, every single piece, from the people that make our vaporizers, what the costs are, the hash, the oil that we're getting, who's producing the best, the right price, and really kind of fitting in everyone's specialty is how it's working, and how we're actually making margins and we're surviving. But I'm excited for other states. I think like, New York, I know you said really, like, we have a few different states we're in, but in a lot of these states are suffering too, and there's, you go there, unless you have like, you're fully vertical there and you have that piece of it, a lot of these licensing deals don't really make sense. And my team isn't focusing on that, because it's just like a lot of these, fielding a lot of these grounders and these phone calls and things like that, it occupies valuable time that we need to operate our business in California. And we just don't have the time to do that anymore. And it's like a lot of these different states, unless you have like partners or part of your real team that have people in these states, I've just been disappointed time after time after time. And like, it's just, I want to, and a lot of times it's not really these people's fault. They mean best, and they have like a certain, but things happen. Like, look what happened in Oklahoma. It's like, there were certain people who went out there and they invested a lot and they lost a lot of money, and they're just like, that. Where I'm going is, there's no state that's going to pop up that's going to be like, this is the next state, it's just, and if it is, then it could turn to be like the biggest problem for us as a country, like, Oklahoma, and what it did to like the industry, like all the way across the board. So I'm just saying, go where it makes sense, going and being like, hey, well, I'm in 7 states, and like it's a big headache, and you have all these products that's different, and it's not good for your brand. It's not good, you know. And it to me, if you're in one more state and you have someone that can produce and like put out a good, and they have a team that can actually, you know, order the bags, you know, all the different details of all the shit and the phone calls and the stuff that it takes to actually have a product, that compliance, it takes so much fucking shit. And it's like, people wonder, like, why are you working with like bigger companies? Well, the little companies often are the ones that, first of all,
fuck everything up. Yeah.
Thanks for growing me the 50 pounds. Appreciate it. And then I'll get the fucking my $3,500 royalty off of that. And then, you know, it's just like, business is business. Even no matter how much you want to go give hugs, like, there's money. I'm in this to make money. You know, I'm in this to help people, but this is business, and I'm in here to make money. And like, that's, I mean, I don't, that's, you know, that's how, you know, we live. This is my livelihood. So there has to be a balance with that. And that's what a lot of people don't get. Even people that have like 200 lights, 300 light, like, by the time they give you some space for your brand, and this is like, it's like, dude, like, okay. And oftentimes they're not cultivating it at a, you know, it's tough to find people that can keep your brand in these different states at a level where you're happy with, you know, and that's up to your, and that's something that's important too. So, you know,
there's more to it. There's business to it too. You know, you have to have an understanding of business, how to present something, how to structure something, how to manage it, monitor it. You know, it's not easy. It's really like,
it takes smart
there's
people.
so much to it.
It takes a lot of smart people. It takes nerds. It takes cool nerds. It takes creatives. It takes cultivators. It takes money. It takes everything, or else it's just a pipe dream, you know? There's a lot of aspects to it.
Sure. What
the other thing is, there's the business side of it, where as these states go and they develop, I'm excited that you're almost in a time machine when you go to these states, right? And yes, there's other people from other states that can go, but if people fuck with me, or they fuck with you, or they fuck with us, and we're like, yo, we already know the story, and we know the beginning, the middle, and the end. How about we come in and give you like the cheat codes, and we can like, and we bring in the right people, and we can like, it's going to be tough, and in the end, the price is going to go down, but let's make our money in the next 3 years and bounce, and then we'll go do it in like 5 states. And even then though, I wish I could find one group like Mike and we could go do it all, but unfortunately sometimes you got to find different groups. That's where I find the challenge. But what I'm saying is, the investment money is as these states go and develop, the money's going to follow that trail. And the same way the money got put into California and got invested, and everything's washing out the way it is now, it's going to happen in these other states too, because people know what's going to happen. It's going to come up. The prices, it's rare. You know, there's a certain amount of window where there's even guys, you know, that a smart play is you go in and you just have a team and you get some licenses and you dump those, and you never even grow a single plant. But, you know, just you have a lawyer and you have somebody who can go and, you know, get licensing. That's another part of the business that, you know, even going back to right after Prop 215 days, people made millions of dollars.
It's like, there's, like I was saying earlier, there's just, what happens is the industry within that state and their system matures and develops to a point where you have, again, you know, just good operators, and maybe some of those good operators might have hit a home run with a brand here or there, but you'll never be able to get around what California can do for a brand and how a brand's built, because we have so many consumers and our laws are put together in a way where what every operator in every single state starts to realize is their longevity is based on brands and genetics. And that's it. Because they get strong enough and well built enough that they can work together within their laws in their state. The only 2 things they need now are strains and brands. That's all they fucking need. And they don't really typically all the time have the ability to present those things, or, you know, and they're shooting stars. You can't capture them. You know, it's just, and that's where California comes in. That's where having a strong team comes in, because if you're smart enough, you know how to go to these operators and say, hey, look, you got a great operation here. You got beautiful shit. My brand has this recognition. And then, you know, figuring out tissue culture, genetics and But you're right, you have to have the right partnerships. You can't fucking make it go. But it's just consolidating and cooking down to the point where even Massachusetts, even the different states that I look at, they're all, you're seeing these operators start to kind of pop their head up, and they're like, okay, because, you know, look at cookies. They're a great example. There are multiple states, but you get, you know, different quality or versions of quality within that state based on, so you got to give them props for even being able to have a strong enough brand to be able to grow with those sort of issues, you know, and I think they've done a great job, but it's, you know, I still have to give them flowers because it's like, fuck, man, they are doing it. They are setting the example. They're big enough to be the example all the time and take all the fucking shots too, which is the thing. But it's not easy, man. I think a lot of people, you know, it goes so far beyond being a trap brand. You know?
Cookies and Burner is like as an exception, right? Like I think speaking more to like the people that don't, you know, that maybe they want to go to a different state and for the first time, or they're going to their third state or something, right? It's like even going to your second state, you know, I think, you know, yeah, just finding the right people. But yeah, Cookies is different animal because, you know, he's going to attract the good operators, not in all the cases, but, you know, Burner's smart and he's a good connector and he's able to find the right people. And so, but from a smaller business, like maybe some of the people that are listening, you know, that are, you know, even people that we would work with, right? It's like, there is key people that are doing good things in certain states. And I agree with you. It's about like, you know, who the good brands are, right? And it's kind of us all kind of figuring that out, where it's like, okay, at least we know this guy's a good dude. He grows fireweed. They do good extracts. How does that come together, right? And production comes into a big play, right? Because a lot of these producers I'm finding now is they have their own brand. Before they didn't have genetics, they didn't have their brand either. Now they might have like the brand, it's kind of weak, but maybe they source some decent genetics and they're just making a run for it, you know? Yeah. And so even for people like that, how do we come in and support that? Okay, cool. Here's some genetics, run it, test it. You like it? Cool. Keep it. Let's go. Like, I'm not tripping. It's not no ego trip. I'm not trying to force my brand on you. Like, run this shit, find the heat, and let the weed speak for itself, right? That's what I love about it. Like, the genetics are in there, and if it's given to the right cultivator, like, it's gonna come out, you know. And like, that's what I'm excited about. A lot of the stuff of the work I did is like people are running it right now. Like Christian's running it. Like my boys up in Oregon are running fucking 1,000 plants of it. They're fucking, I'm right 3, 4, 5 weeks away from harvest on all these bays. And I'm like pumped, you know, and really start like diving into that. And then these new headband, you know, releases that we're going to be doing with the headset, you know, I'm excited about that stuff. That's one of my favorite profiles. That's why I decided.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I just wanted to say about the cannabis industry, and just while we're ending the subject, I think one of the biggest issues that I see in the cannabis industry when it comes to companies coming together and working together is that everybody's always on the high and they're always super hyper focused on all the good shit. And the real measure in business is what people do when everything falls the fuck apart. So when you're looking at your deal or looking into going into a deal, our industry, a lot of the time, everyone just wants to focus on the good. No one wants to fucking like put the joint out for a second and be like, hey, if this doesn't go right, how does each of our companies walk away from this with the least amount of damage, the least amount of, you know, the two of us or the three of us, how are we able to split up that damage? And what happens if this thing falls apart? And if there were more of that, I think there'd be a lot better business in cannabis. And I think, you know, what you're talking about is like, that's why we work together, because we can have that conversation like, all right, look, if this doesn't work out, everyone still gets to go do this. And you know, like, that's kind of the maturity of an industry that sort of comes. But that's one of the biggest issues in cannabis I see, is that everybody wants to like high five on Instagram and talk and blab about the business. But there's not, you know, like what people say about contracts, like contracts are only there in case shit falls apart. Because now you can go, oh, no. It says here on line 6 that you can't do that. And that's kind of like, you know, in cannabis, what people need to do is pay more attention to that, like in our industry. And if that were the case, I think it'd be a lot better, because a lot of what we talked about today was how these deals fell apart and fucking,
But you
you're
know
like,
what? These contracts and these lawyers and all they're all fucking idiots, man. I swear.
That's
Like
true.
these, like they know what they're doing. The only thing worse is divorce lawyers, but like cannabis
don't
lawyers
even
are
get me
pretty much
started.
second right behind them.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, it's true. You've heard that saying, like that like these contracts, they're only as good as like the word the person's word, and really it's fucking true, man. Because in the end, nobody wants to go to court. A lot of this shit, especially in the cannabis industry, we've been fucking the black sheep of the legal, whole industry, where we haven't even had rights really, like, and we still don't have rights in terms of ownership of these plants and the IP that we have to create around it. Like, we don't have ownership of this shit. So
Nope.
that's part of what fuels like the industry and the way it is, and that leads into banking and so many other things and shit. But
we're almost there.
Yeah.
Closer every single day. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of, in our conversation as we were talking, I kept thinking of that. I'm like, man, if people were just more realistic when they go into a deal, and let that be a major part of what you're thinking about, is like, hey, I don't want to be the fucking wet blanket, but
you know what I think
what if
the biggest
all this doesn't work out?
You know what I think a good contract is like working with smart people that, and here's the thing. It's not about being a good, someone told me about this. I was like, how do I do business with people? And how do people do so much business when there's so many shitty people out there? And I could go and hang out with someone for like fucking, 2, 3, 4 times. We go hang out, we go on vacation. I might think they're a good person. They're really not, right? And what it really comes down to it is like, if you're smart enough to know that if the business should work, and calculating with your team, basically it's a mathematic equation. Like, what are the chances that I'm actually going to make money through this transaction? And that's the way we operate now. That's the way my whole team operates. That's what my CEO taught me, right? Is like, and that's what's so dope about my team now. And this is the other aspect of it, little nugget I'll give too, is like, that's part of how it's about being smarter enough to know what doesn't work, right? I think so many aggressive businesses and companies, they want to go, and it's so important to them to say that they're in 4 states or 5 states, that they're sacrificing so much, and it's going to fuck them. You know what I mean? So it's really having a good team that can go in and know the numbers, and even if they don't, my operators, dude, my CEO goes, yo, what's the numbers here? What's this? If my guys got to have it back to them in a matter of fucking hours. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you don't know, find out. You don't just sit there and go, well, I don't know, or call your buddy or whatever. Just like, do the research. It's out there. There's analytics and things in all these states. You can know.
You should know. Yeah, you should know what your operational model is, what your financial model is. Like,
but also,
if you don't know those things,
also in that state,
what the fuck are you doing?
What's the price of the product going in that state? What's going on?
Compliance.
All that
compliance is major. That'll shut everything the fuck down. Like, this is how it is. But
Sherb, I wanted to ask you, in the last 6 or 12 months, if there's been any varietals that you've seen coming from other camps that you've been really, really surprised with or impressed by.
Honestly, I'm loving that Zope. Like, I'm a fan. Like, there's other things that I taste in it that are, like, I don't smoke a lot of it, but I smoked it. I've only smoked it a few times, but out of that whole Olympics box, like, I like the Zushi, like, was really a standout for me. That was like the first time I ever really tasted that profile like that. I think I smoked it before, but I'd never really, whatever it was, that batch. You know how sometimes too, when you try a new strain, and at the first time you smoke it, it like blows you away. But then you smoke it after, and you're kind of like looking for that same way you tasted it. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like, and it's not that the batch isn't good. It's not that it's not as good. It's just kind of like, because even with that strain, I've smoked it since, and it's not kind of like hitting the same, but that was really special. But then there was something about, because like the Zope to me has like gelato like in there, that what I like about it, but then there was like a different kind of like tang to it that I was like, that's nice. But really, a lot of the other stuff that I went through, and I'm always been someone that's been like, yo, let me go try this, or give me this, or I'll go into dispensaries and I'll buy shit. I kind of stopped doing it because I was so fucking disappointed. and all the shit that I'd be like, oh, what? I don't even give a fuck if they're my competitors. If it's cookies, if it's Doja, if it's, I don't give a fuck. I'll be like, oh, let me go try this. And I still do that. I wouldn't spend a bunch of money on a bunch of shit. And I went through and I'm like, fuck, like I smoke everything in there. And I'm like, it's good, it's cool. But I'm just finding like what's really kind of like, wow, I want an ounce. Like, what did I want like an ounce of or a couple ounces of or a quarter pound of? That Zope, that Zushi, I wanted like, I was like, I need a quarter pound of that. I need a, like, and then that was sort of what made me, I haven't felt like that in a while because I like my own weed, but that was like, it was nice to kind of, and look, I big ups, like even like some of these other profiles I just don't enjoy really. I try and try different shit. I love a good OG. I love I love headband, sour type of shit. I don't see a lot of that anymore. But since I got that headset, I've been loving that because it gives me that old school fucking profile that isn't around. And I just
Have you tried the RS11?
The RS11, I don't care for because it's a Sherbert kind of cross type of ish. And I think the original Sherbert's better. And it's the RS11 up against a Bacho. Bacho's stronger. So I'd rather smoke a Sherbert or a Bacho than an RS11 for me personally. But people that don't know my genetics or don't have access to Sherbert or Bacho don't know it. RS11 is like a different, like to me, it's
Their
like
version of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but to me, Zope like is different. Zope hits like a different, like I just call it like a tang. Like it's something on the high end of that hit that's like it's something different that I'm like, all right, this is cool. This is dope. And honestly, it burned really good. Like every bag I've got of that, like from Wizard Trees, I believe grows it, but like it's been fucking phenomenal. Like the few times I've smoked it, it was just grown really well, burned really clean. And then even with a lot of the stuff that was in those Olympics, like I smoked it, it was just like it wasn't, you could tell it had aspects, but the way that it burned wasn't like not up to winning no Olympics. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I'm actually I'm loving, that some of the stuff that Preferred's growing and that Christian just did, that snacks, I think it's called. That's actually pretty good. To me, like I've had a lot of stuff that has like Skittles in it, and I don't like unless it kind of comes from fields. Like I try to just stay away from it. I don't breed with anybody that like we kind of have like a little standing agreement that I'm not going to use a Z on anything. And like, it's weird and it's kind of WWF it kind of vibes, but like, it's just, I respect them. But what's cool is we have been talking about doing like some legacy shit just for the culture. He's like, we're really interested in recreating like some of the genetics we did with LB too. And we have a lot of new things. I've got like a long list of things that have Skittles in it. There's a lot of things that we can do, and I think people want that. So and also that's another way that working with him, that's a collab I want to do, because they are so respected in the concentrate game, and I do like that profile. So like, and I've been fucking with them for a long time, and so they're probably some people that I'm definitely going to be working with soon too. I'm excited about that because that's been just a long time that I've been, it's been coming. We've been talking about it. And there's times when he's like, dude, what the fuck? I saw this I'm like, relax, Fields. I'm not doing it. We're going to do it together. And so we just recently talked. And so I'm excited about that. And because a lot of the people that are breeding for us or that are doing projects are they're the same people. So we're like, yo, it's just, and everything that the climate's right and the environment's right for us to be able to do that. So it's like, I'm excited about that. And then as we spoke about, okay, then we're going to harvest it and yield and find. And so to me, I feel really like humbled and honored to be able to be included, because I'm not there puffing my chest. It's like, I've contributed to the cannabis industry, what I've contributed. And I'm also a student. I think part of why I'm still here is I've always been a student, learning and figuring out how to like survive and how to like strive and how to contribute. So I think I'm excited about this next phase and contributing more hands-on with the genetics, and kind of what Jameson was talking about is like really being able to find and work with people that understand it a lot better than me, like the teams that you bring onto the table, and being like, yo, you guys know what's going to, like, I know what smokes good from my side on the flower side, which I'm going to continue to do. And that's what I'm actually going to enjoy is like, how do we pair, like, where are the keepers for the washing? Where are the keepers for the, I mean, from my understanding, those aren't always the same, you know, in terms of in a hunt.
The nail doesn't lie, man. So it's pretty easy.
We're seeing a resurgence of Piff and Cuban Black Haze and different varietals like that. Is that something that you're going to be exploring, or is that something you're going to leave to others to do?
No, for sure. Never going to leave it all to others, you know. But I mean, I was just smoking some when I was out in New York this last week, and definitely interesting. And you know, it's been there. I've had access to it, but I think just, you know, the same way I did like some projects with Healing of the Nation and the Ethiopian genetics, and that's part of, also I forgot to talk about that, but I did a breeding project with the Healing of the Nations, the Lalabella genetics, and with all the original gelatos. So we have that seed stock, and we've done Danny from Healing of the Nations, you know, my boy, shout out Danny. He's done some incredible pheno hunting of that. So what we want to do as well, like offering, like when you're going back to what you were talking about, I just want to mention this, not to digress, but with Rohan is I came to him like, yo, like, this is what I'm known for. This is what we're doing. This is the Ethiopian. Like, we're not looking to recreate like runts or anything. You know what I mean? It's like, but this is actually what it is. Like, this is what this genetic is. And so that's more what I'm interested in contributing to, like that type of partnership, because I want it to be something that's true. I want it to be something that's like built off legacy and like real Ethiopian landrace genetics, you know, West Coast, you know, gelato genetics, and what that actually is. Whether or not a commercial grower wants to produce that, you know, genetic is not why I did it. You know what I mean? But unfortunately, I think with commercial cannabis and business, that's a factor, you know, and a lot of this crop steering and shit that we're seeing now. And really my heart and where I'm at is on projects like that. And unfortunately, a lot of that seed stock sits, you know what I mean? And a lot of those genetics sits, and it's like, you're pitching dreams and shit like that. But it's like, if it's big and it's purple and pulls 4 pounds of light, then it's a go, and which is cool. But I'm looking forward to like more of a balance where the medicine aspects and the different varieties and the nuances of it, how it makes you feel, and like what it tastes like in a rig, and all those things are factored into, you know, just good medicine and more of a diverse medicine cabinet, you know, for people in these different states. And that's where I want to contribute, is like, no, you just don't take your 2 strains, your Huckleberry Finn strain and this, and wash it, and this is what you're going to get. No, there's better ways. And I think that knowledge is valuable. And I think that knowledge is something that we've earned to be able to contribute to a lot of these other states, and like, frankly, the world. And I think the world, the oyster of the industry is opening up. And I think like when guys like us can crawl out of like the pit of what we've been battling through in California and go to some of these other states where people are like, they're excited about getting in the industry. It's their first time. They haven't been dragged through the mud fucking 10 times and dumped on your head. And then after that, taxes fucking raised on you. You know, it's like, so we have a time machine. We can go in there and be like, this is how it's going to be. This is how you got to set it up. This is how the products that make money, you know, this is, and then have the operations, you know, to speak to your point. And then again, this is the contract. The contract is not only having the operators, but having just knowing, just because like, I don't care if you're a nice person or not. Great. You're not, you know, we'll have a dinner and all the niceties are out of the way, but I'm smart enough to know that what we're putting together is going to make me money. I've narrowed it down to a mathematical equation where I feel that I'm actually, it's more plus. And so that way, that's my kind of nugget in terms of a legal contract, because that means more, spend more money doing that research than having your lawyers do some fucking contract that, yeah, you can sue them, but in this day and age, like, it can be very costly, hundreds of $1,000s. And most of the time it's like, okay, keep the genetics or don't pay me what you owed me, because it's going to cost you more to sue them. And a lot of these companies that are willing to do that have the money to do it, and they're willing to do it, you know? And so that's
nothing short of just being pirates. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I guess where I'm going is I don't want companies to go and spend hundreds of $1,000s of their muchly needed operational money to go fight a battle. You know, it's like, what's that? You know, you win the battle, you lose the war. You know, it's like, I've done that. I've lost, tens of, hundreds of thousands really, on kind of being like, well, you didn't do the right thing. And then you go and you're in a legal battle. And then you don't realize that when people that are willing to go into legal battles, they're pieces of shit. They're litigious pieces of shit. And that's their whole game. And this is also part of the whole predatory lending, is like people knowing like, oh, I got money tucked that I'm willing to spend. And I know you're going to go out of business before I run out of money to sue you. And it's just, they know that, and they'll just drag you along. And so beware of that shit, choose your battles.
It's predatory.
Choose your battles.
Predatory.
It's 100% predatory, but this is the sharky waters we operate in. And, all these people in these industries, they're getting more polished, and their clothes are a little bit neater, and they're, everything's a little bit more, because they've been able to go around to these states that have done it, and they know the verbiage now, and they know what to say, and they know the little pointers, where before it was only us certain people in the industry that knew these moving parts. Mm-hmm. Now it's getting watered down, and it's the quality is going down. And so that's why I know we'll always have value, because as long as I feel like, whether it's food, wine, cars, I don't give a fuck what industry, if you give a fuck about quality, you're gonna gravitate to people like us that are like, oh, I fuck with you because you give a shit about it, so do I. And that's why I know I'm gonna be here, because I don't care if I'm driving my old truck and I'm just fucking doing what I'm totally comfortable doing. Like, I have all my necessities in life, but the plant and the people and that culture is what like gives me energy and drives me, and helping people, and the notion of knowing that in all this bullshit, there's still a lot less alcohol being drank in these places. Opiates there's a lot less people on opiates when they have access to good quality cannabis concentrates. People that I know personally, including my brother that was 100% military, disabled, can put down all of these different opiates because they have access to not just concentrates, but good concentrates, solventless concentrates.
Less drinking and driving, less all kinds of stuff.
I just as we wind down, I wanted to, like, we've talked about a lot of different aspects of the business, but like, I think a lot of the people that still do it, and like people like us that are still doing it, even fighting against all the different aspects of it, they won't let us bank, raising our taxes, fucking not securing our license holders that pay taxes in these cities, and they're letting people get robbed in cities like Oakland. It's fucking crazy. Like, and legacy operators too that are facing this, they got to spend $15,000 to replace their doors that are being busted in. And so like, these are real life issues that my friends are dealing with, and my friend like Tucky and my boy Christian, who have licenses in Oakland. So these are all like realities of what we deal with, but we do it and we stay in it because we love it. And like, these genetics and these seeds, that's why I know, like, I'm not going anywhere. That's why I'm doubling down on these new runs and dialing in with you and understanding, like, okay, what's the real business of this, guys? Like, what do we need to find? And I'm going to learn from all that. This is the only way I learned how to breathe. It's the only way I learned any of it, is just kind of like, let me watch the guys that are doing it, that know what they're doing. And then I quickly can add that into the Sherbinski's business and our model. And so I'm excited about that, and it's also needed. Frankly, it's needed with the flower pricing, condensing, and just everything we're going through. Before, when I didn't really need that revenue, like, that's a huge space. And to speak to something you said last week when we were talking on the phone, Addison, you said that, what was it again? You said something about how concentrates is the one thing that's held its price, like, over the years. Like, what was it you said? But that was like, that hit home too, where I'm doubling down on that and understanding that too, that part of the business.
The price of rosin, a gram of rosin, the gram of rosin itself and the inputs for that gram of rosin have not changed for the last 5 years. Been the same exact price. While the flower price has fluctuated incredibly, what it says is that if you don't diversify and, steer your company in the direction of solventless, and steering your company in the direction of, being able to provide and offer solventless products to your customer base, then you're losing a whole entire major growth sector of the entire market. So it's, a lot of guys fuck themselves just on that alone. you know.
Yep.
But yep, it's a huge part. It's a big part of the market, and it's another thing that people don't realize is that the way to make cannabis or to control the perishability of cannabis, because cannabis is a perishable product, is to separate it into microns and freeze it. That's one of the best ways to take this, you know, because we see it all the time. You got good genetics, you got a great grow team, you get amazing harvest, everything's coming down the line, it looks beautiful, the season's perfect. Next question is, what the fuck are you going to do with all this?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is, well, we're going to fucking harvest it into flour, and then we all know that when you do that, when that's the path that you choose, there's a bunch of vulnerability along that path with that product because it's vulnerable to environment, it's vulnerable to different temperatures, it's going to degrade, it's going to break down, you're going to lose a specific amount of it. When you now start looking at, instead of harvesting to flour, and then now having an infrastructure where you can harvest, take fresh frozen material that's harvested correctly, it's different. It's not like it's going to be harvested for flour, but it's harvested correctly. There's low labor in that. There's a little bit of cost in your infrastructure, but now you can suspend the life term of that product. You can take that fresh frozen material that was a harvest, that was going to be flour, that was going to dry, that was going to cost more money to now turn into material that goes into a jar that gets sold. You can take a different direction if you're a farm, and you can now slow down the process. And you don't only slow down the process of the degradation of the product, you also can take the product into your system as a manufacturer, convert it to this material, to micron, you know, water hash, and store it, and you don't pay tax on it till you sell it. So it just sits in your system. So that's why hash and solventless hash is so attractive right now to investors and people that are coming into our industry, because it's also a way to take a perishable product and slow down that perishability process and now turn it into, you know, separate the microns, take some of those microns, turn those microns into your vape pen for solventless, take the other microns and turn those into your capsules that are solventless specific from the same line, take some of the other microns and turn those into your edible line that are strain specific to the same exact stuff, and then take your 90 and 120 micron, press that shit and make rosin. I just made 6 fucking SKUs from one single harvest from one field. That's what solventless is, and that's how you can do that. And once these numbers dudes came in and saw it all, they're like, wait, what are these fucking nerds doing with hair straighteners? Like, what the fuck is going on? Oh, they're actually the dudes who figured out how to preserve this highly fucking, you know, this huge commodity. They figured out how to preserve a commodity. And then also, here's what they've done too. When you take a strain, you harvest it, and you break it down into microns, you can take those higher end microns and blend them with other high end microns from another strain, press them, and make a brand new fucking SKU.
Addison.
Now I have 3 SKUs, motherfucker. You know, it's like, this is why solventless hash is the future of what's going on.
Let me ask you this though. Let me just kind of address the elephant in the room. Things that you're saying, people at a high level, they know this, right? Like you said, investors are gaming up on this. So where do you see like the industry in like a year per se, right? Like where more big grows are coming in. You got like Glass House that's bringing on hundreds of thousands of fucking, you know, people I personally know that are fucking football fields on football fields of grows. So like we already know what's happening in the industry. How do you, what's your vision? Like if you had a crystal ball, like where do you see it going? I know everything you've been saying about the principles of it, but meaning the price was going to go down, similar to what's going to happen if more people are doing it and it's all available and there's better growers. It's going to be a race to the bottom, right? So how do you compete in that, and where do you think it's going to come down to? Is it going to be brands and a lot of the points you made earlier? Just I wanted your thoughts on that.
I think people are going to realize that you need a very efficient system in order to be successful. And what I mean by that is that you have to understand what you do really well and lean in that direction as much as possible while you build strategic partnerships. And like when it comes to solventless material, or when it comes to our entire industry, it's dependent upon guys like yourself who create strains which are SKUs, individual SKUs. Like right now we're talking to you, right? You're fucking you're Mario Guzman, you're Sherbinski. You made gelato. That's the fucking strain right now. That is the basis of the entire hype market that you just talked about. Every fucking strain in Olympics is pretty much a fucking gelato or a Sherb cross that came from what? One fucking strain. So the future of all this is strain specific. Yeah. And the future of all this is not what everyone thinks it is. And that's not fucking inclusion. It's the opposite of inclusion. It's open the fuck up. It's share what you have. It's make sure that, because now you have a more open playing field for everyone's talents to come out. And what do you need to make a whole team run is talent. So if you open up and you allow it to be more open source and everyone works, oh, well, guess what? Now I can see the real fucking talent in the field. And all that talent sort of walks up and fucks them all together. That's how shit moves. So, cut the inclusive bullshit out and focus on strains, focus on strategic partnerships, and understand that if you aren't putting hard shit in front of yourself every fucking day, how are you going to handle all the hard shit that comes after what you put in front of yourself? You're not. So instead of, like the boxer, the analogy of the boxer who makes all the money, and then it's hard to slide out of silk sheets at 5 a.m. It's not hard to slide out of silk sheets at 5 a.m. if you love what you fucking do. That's the difference, like you don't have to be David Goggins. You don't have to be Jocko Willnick, but you damn well better be fucking disciplined. You damn well better be willing to earn what the fuck's in front of you. And you damn well better be making yourself a little bit uncomfortable, because it's that conquering of that ability that really makes that builds the chops that it's gonna happen to what you're gonna need to get through the dark times, right? Because if right now what you're saying is dark times are coming the next 2 years, I see it completely differently. I see it as like the next couple years are gonna be, you're just gonna get to see who's really good at what they do and who's the best at what they do, and that's that's what's already happening. I see it already happening. I see, people getting nervous and scared, but you have to be courageous. You have to be brave. You have to be willing to work with people. You have to not be afraid, and you just got to fucking, just discipline yourself and work hard. That's what it's going to fucking take.
Yeah. And on that note though, what I mean is I'm looking, and I commented on this, is like more of like what the country is headed into. I mean, just to point out one thing is like, look at our fucking gas prices right now. Just to point out one thing. Let's not get into a bunch of shit, you know what I mean? And just for you working class folk, like that makes a big fucking difference, man. And like, those are the kind of things that affect our business, no matter how good, let's say our margins go up 10%, right? But gas prices and everything and healthcare and food costs and everything goes way the fuck up, then we're losing, dude. And our regular working folk are losing. So it's like, I'm concerned about that. But even the industry, even surviving, and even no matter what aspect of the business, we're going to get crafty. We're going to figure out the business. I'm confident in that. It's just, I just thinking more of like the state of our country, and like, and overall, that in terms of buckling down, that we should be wise with our partners, wise with there's no room for fuckery. There's no room for, hey, if it doesn't work out, I'm good. Nah, that could take you out of business.
Wipe you the fuck out. Yeah.
Yeah. So just, I guess I'm all about like moving forward, but also I want everyone to be like smart in that regards, well,
in order to survive, people have to get more, you gotta look at your shit and figure out where you can cut some of these costs and say like, maybe I don't need Starbucks every fucking day. Maybe I'm going to learn how to make coffee at home and really fall in love with that. And like, there's just things that people can do, I think. And it's way beyond coffee, but like, dude, as I've gotten older, I don't run the fucking water when I brush my teeth.
I know you like your bougie coffee, dude.
I do like bougie coffee, but I'm very, I make my shit with a pour over at home, but I go to Starbucks too. The truth is that like everybody can make adjustments and tighten things up. Do I think that like the cannabis industry is doomed because we're going into a recession? No. Look at the last time there was a recession. Motherfuckers smoke more weed. They actually want weed more. So it's not that. It's about like, I think it's really recessions and things like this and times like this are great times to look at yourself and look at how you can cut some costs and look at how you might be able to change your shit up a little bit. And that's really what it comes down to. Because if you're, if you're a fucking hustler, there ain't no such thing as a fucking recession. That shit, hustle harder. Like there's a sign on the wall right there that says no one cares, work fucking harder. Like that's how you get, like, look at the generation of our parents or the older people we were just talking about earlier. Like your grandfather, the Sicilian, those are fucking hustlers. They don't give a shit. They fucking hammer. They're like, what? I'll hammer my job and I'll go to war. What do you got? Like, bring it to me. Like, fish with one fucking arm. Like, we ain't, hard times build fucking strong men. And we're strong men. I know I'm a fucking strong man. So if you bring more hard times to me, you're just going to make a stronger man. Like, I'm not too fucking worried about it.
Hey, Addison, I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere.
I know you ain't going nowhere. I see you with the kettlebells. I know it's up.
I'm still here, man. I'm still here.
What's in your entire cannabis career? Is there a single moment that stands out as your proudest?
It's a tough one. I think starting Sherbinskis, and just sort of having my brand, and I think having the belief in myself to just take my own path regardless of where it went, and I'm proud of that. And I think just the contribution that I've made to the industry, and that's it, nothing more, nothing less. And just I don't look at myself as any different than anybody that's in the game. People look at me and give me certain credit for certain things, and I'm appreciative of it, but for the most part, I'm just grateful, and that I love what I do. It's always challenge for me, every day is something new. I'm meeting new people. I've been around the world. The industry is always going to be that to me. And I was talking about earlier, the oyster is just opening up. The trenches we've been in California is to me, just the school of hard knocks, but there's a ton of more that can be done throughout the country and throughout the world. So I'm grateful for that. That's number one for me, and to me that I can be old and I can, until as long as I can walk and I can use my head, I can make seeds and I can go do business. So that's pretty much it. And the people, man, the people that appreciate the weed, that I think a musician, when you make a really dope piece of music and people connect with it, to me, that's how I look at it. I receive that back from people that breed with my shit, smoke my stuff. And so, shout out to everybody that's ever been a supporter. Shout out to, everybody on my whole team at Sherbinskis. And I did want to talk about what's going on in New York a little bit before we go. If you want to, just to give everybody a little.
Absolutely.
So I have been working on this project. It's called the House of Cannabis, but it's in New York, on Broadway. It's going to be a paid experience. So think of if the Museum of Ice Cream or something, but 10 times bigger and for the weed industry. And really what it's about is it's just connecting with the community. There's going to be a lot of education through social equity, but there's going to also be movies that we create that are going to be specific about the industry, every aspect of it. Some of it's going to be for fun. That's going to be entertaining. Some of it's going to be educational, but then also I'm bringing in a lot of the best people in the industry that I've worked with, guys like Candid Kush, other people that have done amazing macro photography that I've worked with, that we're going to be able to educate the just your regular day person that smokes weed and show them the plant in ways that I'm actually working with Addison on this. Show them the plant in ways that they haven't seen it before, and then kind of direct them in really easy terms, hey, this is a trichome. This is how we go through the process of extracting it, and really introducing them to solventless extraction. And, I'm working with Addison to basically make that real simple for people to understand through images. And so I've been able to bring in people from the industry that are my friends, and we're going to be able to really also educate people on that extraction process and how, you know, the terpenes, and a lot of people don't understand what terpenes are. And so there'll be a whole experience that, you know, my girlfriend Victorine is going to be creating, and she's amazing. She makes sense, and her brand Dusted. So there's going, as you go through the experience, there's going to be different elements of terpenes that will be added into the visual aspect. So these are just to touch on some of the things we're going to be doing. We're going to have a space on top for different gatherings that we're developing. That's going to be amazing. And also other brands and selected collaborations that we're going to be bringing into the table, like Carta, and different curated people that we want to bring in and showcase, you know, out there. And it's going to be real curated. It's not a smoke shop, but I think there's certain brands and items, you know, that we're selecting very carefully that we think are kind of deserve to be in a place that's celebrating everything that's cannabis. And a lot of people ask me questions about it, and they have, you know, some different, you know, notions of what it is. But I wanted to give a little information out there that it's not a dispensary. We're not selling weed. It's, you know, it's a paid experience for people. That's the revenue, is that people are going to come and we're going to give them an experience, and we're going to, you know, expose them to things that they haven't been exposed to, you know, and educate them on things. And it's not about brands. Like, you're not going to go in there and I'm going to have all these cannabis brands paste it all over, because, you know, to us, it take away from the experience. And we want it to be about the plant, and we want it to be about community. So really excited about, you know, we had Fab Five Freddy over there, and, you know, walking the through the building, and, you know, to get his input of him being there in the 80s with guys like Basquiat and Andy Warhol and the art scene, and developing on that same block, and to be full circle being in there now, and his cannabis brand, and us doing a project. So it's about curating the right people that we think it's their story to be told a lot more than ours. And so it's about just knowing who those people are and bringing the right people in, and to make it a real community project. So it's I'm excited, the team, and I think there's truly going to be nothing like it in the industry. And it's really for the industry. If it's for the plant, you're really first, you know, but it's really for everybody that's sort of loves cannabis and loves the plant, to be able to go there and be like, all right, I'm not working. This isn't about brand competition. I'm not going to have all these brands I know plastered all in front of my face. Let me go see, like, and experience a little bit about, like, this plant that I love. And so that's really the overall vibe. But stay tuned. If you guys want to, it's right on Broadway and Howard. If you guys want to take a look, it's the old American Apparel building. It's 5 floors with rooftop. It's an amazing building. It's 35,000 square feet. I think the building was built in 1870, historic building. So it's I can't wait to share more with you guys, but that's coming. That's something that I've been excited about. And frankly, what's nice is to be working on something that's outside of, like, regulated cannabis, but still cannabis, because I've been in this industry so long, and I've been doing what I'm doing and still doing. We still running an everyday part of my team at Sherbinskis, and making decisions every day. But also, I think for where I want to go, and how I think I want the narrative of cannabis to be told, is like, this is kind of a key thing where it can go there, and it, you know, there's no place like New York, and there's no place like a building like that, Broadway. So, you know, when we're launching different things, when brands want to have a stage to kind of, like, showcase, like, what they're doing, it's just an incredible space. And the lounge that we're creating on the top floor is just, it's next level. There's really nothing that's like it in the industry. So to me, it's about connecting with the people that are already in the community, bringing them in, you know, and just doing dope events, doing dope, you know, really there's going to be a lot of that. I mean, I love New York. I love the vibe. For those of you that haven't been in a while, like, New York is definitely back. You know, it's like, it's nice to see the city just breathing and being what it was, you know, and maybe not back to what the real New Yorkers know what it was, but it's like, it's a lot of them are saying that it's getting there. So, you know, I love spending the time there. And I think a lot of people in the industry spending more time out there. And I'm excited. It's definitely not, it's not the Bay Area. It's not LA. I just love the energy. And I think it's such a bigger market that, and there's so many different people that are doing really dope creative things that it's just going to be a plus in so many ways for all of us, because I think creatively, some of the most creative people I know, are from New York, and some of the coolest and dope shit. Like, it's really like an epicenter for a lot. And so I think a lot of the West Coast people that are coming out there, I mean, there's really, when you come to legacy people that are really out there, there's a short list of people that, and even just to a few years ago, people in the state of New York were having to like operate, behind closed doors, and they weren't able to be so open about it. Us in the West Coast, we have been able to be like out front a little more with that. So I've been kind of going with open arms, saying, hey, like, I do, I'm not a savior or anything, but with the right people that receive it, I want to contribute like some of like, hey, this is these really the genetics, and there's a little catch up, I think, for people getting these indoor cultivations and stuff. And, there's licenses out there, and, people getting some things going, but I think it's going to be a bit before we're going to see some quality, for extracts first, with some of them processing probably, but then I'm just kind of, not in any rush on, getting anything going. Just want to make sure that it's quality and it's with the right groups, and, but I'm definitely excited about that. I think that's
100%. I think events and consumption lounges are the next step to normalizing and converting more individuals. I think it would be really hard to establish a booming alcohol industry if you weren't allowed, if the only place to drink alcohol was at home. So I think that, I'm really excited to hear that. Like, I think bringing that education to individuals that otherwise might not seek it out is super important. So I'm going to check it out. I'm going to go out of my way to check that out.
I don't want to tell you guys everything, because then it wouldn't be, you got to have a little element of surprise, but that was just a taste of what's going to be on a part of a floor in a certain area. But there's 3 floors that are going to be all part of the experience, other than the lounge and the merchandise and ticketing on the bottom floor. But we're going to have a gelato shop. So just like similar to like, it's going to be like cannabis flavors. And you'll have coffee on the bottom floor, exotic snacks. There's a lot of dope shit that are going to be on the bottom that are going to be like, and there's going to be, you could buy the Sherbinski Carta that's only available at, at the House of Cannabis. And there's going to be exclusive things that I'm working with Addison to bring in, like curated, like, yo, what are the guys that are in the industry? What are the top shit, like the dab right, certain different products that we want to curate, and just, because there's people that are going to be visiting from all over the country, all over the world, and people enjoy concentrates. And I think if they're going to come and get something at a place like this, it's going to be something that they might not have access in their local smoke shop or something. It's like, oh, holy shit, I can go use this with my rig or whatever. And then it's something kind of cool. It reminds me of like when I grew up in Sacramento, and we would drive to San Francisco, and we would go to Haight Street, and we go to Pipe Dreams, and they would have like all the dope heady glass and shit. And it was like, it was an experience. And you went home and you had something that you couldn't get in your neighborhood, and you had something a little special. I don't need to tell you guys about it. You're doing it now, but they're $30,000 or $40,000. It never ends. But this is part of what we also want to bring into there, like the mothership, like conversations, and like, how do we like bring in to this amazing experience the people that should be there, right? And like,
and that's why I'm stoked to be a part of it, because it's like getting to having 800 involved and have 800 be a part that can kind of say, hey, in an honest way, in a truthful way, like these are the brands that really have an impact on the experience, and doing that, and not being a favorite to some brand or something, but just being like, look, if you're really, I want someone who, what I want is someone who comes from France to that's a dabber that enjoys solventless hash, that might be, really deep into it. I want them to go, oh, fuck yeah. Oh, okay. Mothership and Octave and oh, okay. The best smart rig and this and that and that. And that's kind of, or just even, some of the other stuff, like telling that story and having that dude from France who knows cannabis and understands active compounds and separation, and, having that person also be able to look and see what gets put together there and go, yeah, this is true. This is
Right.
actually, yeah, those are terpenes, flavonoids, esters. These are the compounds. This is, oh yeah, it is separation. These are the, all right, great. Yeah,
While we're at
we
it,
can train.
Addison, let me go ahead and announce that Addison DeMoura has or is I'm awaiting the paperwork, but soon to be the expert that I'm bringing on to make sure that all these facts are accurate. So it will be accurate. It will be fire. It will be
It'll be
told.
real.
It'll be
Yeah.
told in a digestible way.
Yep.
You know what I mean? What I actually like about you is you are able to say it in a nerdy way, but it's very digestible. You know, it's and that's what I think needs to happen at the on the project, right? It's like you don't want to we don't want to take them down reading a wall, but there's aspects and realities of what's happening that are just facts and pointing out, you know, the process and where it can go. And what I love about it is that through that also understanding the terpenes, which I'm like, that part I'm even, you know, more excited about, because I think there's a whole lot of undiscovered parts of that are, I think, are going to be developed a lot more in the next, you know, coming years too.
Well,
You
that's
know,
what everyone's fallen in love with. You know, we've talked about it a billion times, and like the only difference, the major difference between one strain and another is not the active compounds. It's typically the terpene profile. That's what's different. You know, you take 10 of them, you got 10 fucking different terpene profiles, but you got the same 3 active compounds. So the terpenes are different. So that is, you know, that's the real part of it. For
we
sure.
need that. We need that.
Don't leave out all the others. Like we can't champion terpenes without mentioning that there are other constituents that have massive influences on our sensory experiences, right? Like we have to acknowledge thiols, we have to acknowledge esters, we have to acknowledge
flavonoids.
There's you know, and there's others. And so I think that you know, we have to understand that there are things working in concert, and maybe that skunky smell or that cheesy smell or that gassy smell isn't a single terpene working, because you know, we've all smelt the isolated terpene compounds from the companies, and they might be similar, but they're not the same as you know, these true to form profiles that we see. So I think whenever we mention terpenes, we can't just mention terpenes, because then we're educating individuals only up to a certain level and not letting them know that there's actually a lot more to explore after you've wrapped your head around terpene.
Well,
So
I think
I love where you're going with that. And I was wondering though, if you were if you were walking through a wall, past a wall, right, and you had a little section out of what you like, what are like what are the things, like you say top 3, what are the ones that you think are, you know, are the most important, or maybe some of the ones that you're more aware of that you could share?
I think like the ones listed, like the thiols and esters are proven to have like really impactful effects around certain flavor profiles that in the community we are really attracted to, like the gas profile, the skunk profile. And even though there's not enough studies on it, like I think finding ways to explain terpenes, but not break them into the actual names of the terpenes. Like there are terpenes that play in beer, but nobody's asking us to learn beta-caryophyllene. And so I think that finding like unique ways to break it up into different categories. I know Kevin Jodry's doing an interesting thing where he's broken it up into fruit, fuel, floral, and earth. And I think that, you know, from there you can really place everything into those major 4 categories and then explain nuances going forward. But I don't know if asking large populations to be able to identify or say, hey, this is really merging forward. I don't see it going that way, but I mean, everybody definitely sees it differently.
No, I like where you're going with it though. I appreciate that. Yeah.
I think we need to use like adjectives. Like we need to be like watch, you know, wine documentaries, and you got a bunch of full-grown men sipping wine and spitting it out and going, cold slate, cold dry slate, dried apricots, stone fruit, wet plum, you know, like that. That's where we need to be going, not with like, oh, this is.
Listen, but when we get to that point, I want to be dead. I don't want any part of any of that. I don't want another man telling me what the fuck I'm experiencing. I personally like. I just want to die. Like if it comes to that point, just like the two dudes looking at Earth from the moon, and the other guy has the gun to the back of the dude's fucking head.
Addy with his fucking punch.
If that's where we are, one of you just shoot me in the fucking head. And leave me in
what happened? What about just fucking grabbing a bud and squeezing it and smelling it? How about that? How about just the smell of smelling a fucking nug? How about smelling a fucking hash?
How about this?
Simple, How
about
sensories?
This? We don't start telling each other how to use our senses to make decisions on things that we like. And how about, that's the same, because you're getting into the place now where it's like, now you're telling me what boxes I need to check. And I might not even think those boxes make any sense. So it's like,
no,
when it comes to cannabis,
I'm just talking about smelling weed and it's smelling good. Just as simple as that. There's no deeper thought, like in like.
Yeah.
We'll go down
then
a rabbit
what
hole.
happens is the person, they want to smell it and they want to say something. Then they want to be like, well, Mario, and it's like, my answer is always the same. Just roll that shit up, smoke it, and shut the fuck on up over there. Like I don't need any of those. I don't need any of that stuff.
I think there needs to be descriptors, and I think we need to lean more heavily on flavor categories and things that people are familiar with than asking people to learn a new vernacular and then apply that to this industry when we don't know their level of commitment. Like what you're saying, Addy, is, if you gave me a jar and I said, describe the nuanced flavor to me, you'd say, fuck you, Jameson, like smoke it and you'll be able to tell yourself. But that's a very niche consumer market that doesn't need any education. It's not seeking any education. And so I think that you need to be able to direct people. And in Canada, you're seeing a lot of wasted money and failed marketing programs. And when you say, oh, it's very beta cariophylline forward, instead of saying it's got a peppery nose with hints of lemon, I think you lose people to that descriptor. And so I think you try and, the same way you try and make a cookie or a cracker or any consumer good sound more appealing, you try and do that same thing where, hints of toasted coconut. The brain is a very suggestive. We want to know, we want information before we take this thing in. And I know when you get to a high level, it's like, don't fucking tell me what you think it tastes like. Like, I want to make my own decision. But what's for us and what's for the general consumer are two very, very different things.
But most of the time when someone is brave enough to tell me what it smells like or tastes like, along the process, I say in my head, no. Like, so that's just the thing, is that like, I'm never going to be big into that. Someone reaching a point of their enlightenment around cannabis that they're now going to teach me how to fucking understand what I'm consuming. Like, no, that's not going to happen unless you have a motherfucking time machine and we're going to go back to 1982 and you're going to show me how to roll a goddamn joint. No, fuck no. Because in 1982, skunk is a sulfate, that's skunk. It's a fucking smell that's there. Right. So if I could be articulate enough to know the scientific end, like Mario was just saying, oh, Addy, I like the way that you explain that shit because you articulate it correctly so that, people can understand it. Same difference. If nothing fucking bores me more than when I listen to some asshole explain to me beta cariophylline and fucking blah, blah. It's like, no, asshole, what are you trying to show off the fact that you know what beta cariophylline is? Like, I don't give a fuck. What's truly important is like, hey, do you like that smell? Awesome. You like how it smells? That's cool. Like, let's roll it up and see if you want to smoke it. It's not like hints of shut the fuck up. Like a lot of hints of shut the fuck up as far as I'm concerned. Like, I'm not buying into anyone's, and I personally, I don't like authority. So I don't like anyone coming to me and being like this. I'm like, no. Instant response, no. Not at all. Like, go whatever. So no, that's personally my personal opinion.
What do you think, Sherb?
I think he lost me like 10 minutes ago because I don't know what he's arguing about. I think he's just on like
just
he's on a
dabbed
Captain
out.
Morgan moment, and I'm just letting him
No.
roll.
He's talking about how fuck strange descriptions, and I'm talking about people.
No, but you know what? I get it, and rant received. But the reality is, like, you mentioned one guy I've never heard of. Like, who's doing it? If there's
it doesn't need
there's
to be
ways.
done.
I mean, look, what I'm talking about, just to bring things into context, I'm talking about. I don't know what you guys were talking about, but I was talking about descriptions and of terpenes, of profiles. And I was talking about it on a simple level as what anybody smells like. If I smell a bud that from the same batch of my whatever, and I give you the same bud, you could experience it in a different way than I do, right? Like there's similarities and things like, so on a simple level as that, all the way to how do we evolve the description of how we describe the plant? And right now it's being done in a way where I feel you. It's like, okay, it's like, this is fucking this, and it's just unevolved, right? But but there is a place for with wines, right? To speak to his point, Jameson, you're talking about how wine is described, and there's terms, and it's very, I don't cannabis hasn't got there yet, right? Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I got you.
I mean, hey, like I know, like there's certain things that can be described, but I mean, I think in terms where I was talking about was like with the museum and an educational piece, right? That's yet to be, it's still in form with us. So this is all part of the discussion we're going to have and the consulting you're doing. It's like, how is that? That was the original question. And that's why I love
I don't use the word shut the fuck up at all in any of what I describe either. So that's what's great about this conversation, because
what's shut the fuck up?
There is no, because I'm joking, because I was saying, like, you know, if someone says to me, like, describe this, I'm like, shut the fuck up. In my work with you guys,
to say it, it's all good.
You could, but in my work with you guys, it's more about like, that's why I'm proud to work on this, because it's a cool thing to be able to get to have a position where you can say, hey, this is how I would word this, and this is, you know, what is the, you know, what we talked about, Mario, is like, okay, well, Addie, like, what would, if it's a wall, what does that experience look like? And we've gone through that, and I think that description of, you know, or even like giving someone, I use the example all the time about the difference between extraction and analysis, right? Like, what's the difference between an extraction lab that extracts, you know, cannabis and makes concentrates, and what's the difference between that and an analysis laboratory that actually fucking analyzes cannabis? And the difference is quantification. They're both separating stuff, but an analysis lab is quantifying what's there, identifying and quantifying and telling you more about what you see, where the extraction laboratory is separating everything.
Right.
So one of them is involved in the other. So when you and I talked about, if you look at that principle and use that example, it simplifies it and it shows you what the difference between the two are. And it sets you off in a direction where now you're going to be like, okay, well, what are you separating? And that's kind of how I looked at the issue, was like, well, what are you separating? This is what you're separating. What are you finding there? This is what you find there. And here's how you can get to those places: BHO extraction, solventless extraction. And then here's how you can find those things within those extractions by using these. You could roll a joint, or you could do this, or you could do that. That whole story is a very honest, truthful way to tell a story that doesn't overcomplicate it or put people in a place, or it puts people in a place where once they get to, you know, the terpene part and they see that stuff, then they can Google and they can look, they can write down some key things and be like, I didn't know what fucking esters were. I didn't know that the taste of a banana is an actual ester, and that's not a terpene, and that's not a flavonoid. I didn't fucking know. You can research more. It'll be enough information to then allow you to kind of like dig in a little further. It's not overcomplicated. It has to be that way because people have to digest it, and they still want it to be fun, and they still want it to be interesting enough so that when they're done with your experience, they go and research it furthermore. That's what I was talking about. I was jokefully being like, fuck you. But the truth of the matter is you do have to explain it in a way that people understand. So no, and that's my point. I'm done. So I'm done ranting.
No, is the fuck you at you because you're the one creating the experience, or I just wanted to I just want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Well, the fuck you.
Love you, brother. Love you.
Well, the fuck you is always, that's that's I'm from Boston, so that's what I bring to the table every time.
Listen,
the
point is when you have a short amount of space to tell a story and you want it to be the best, you have to condense a lot of these facts. Because you need photos, you have things that are
digestible,
and so. But point is, we'll work together to make it the most accurate. That's the whole point. Is how do you tell that story with, because it's the whole room was the lab room. And that's why when I brought you in, it was like, we can do way more than a fucking lab room and a piece of extraction equipment.
It doesn't tell a story.
No, it doesn't. And there's so much more that could be told just with the photography, with some facts, with some pieces of equipment, and then why shouldn't we talk about solventless? Why should those things be missed? And so that's why it's important to me that in someone else's experience, without me being part of it, maybe that would be missed and it would be a fucking waste of space. That I don't want to miss those opportunities, not in just that room, but every room. And that's why it's exciting and why it's exciting to get on the project, because I have an opportunity to make it as accurate as possible, and
well, I've seen these things before. We've seen these things before, and we've probably both been disappointed. So it's like, I'm stoked to be a part of it because I can do everything I can to make sure that someone's not going to be disappointed. It'll be accurate and truthful and relevant. I think those are some things that I aim for.
Yeah. And I want in that part, when we're talking about facts with extraction, I want your knowledge to be in there. So it's good. And in other aspects, the people that are creating the film and just all these, it's like, I'm doing the best to curate the best people that can, make the experience everything you said, fun, educational, it's going to be.
Are you guys going to have a dispensary component, or one that you're kind of pointing people towards, that you support, that you guys are, or what's the idea for the actual final mile, whatever they call it there?
No, it's going to be the whole revenue model is just ticket sales.
Are you talking with anyone for production in New York at all for your brand or anything like that? Or
yeah, I've been talking to some people. I mean, a lot of it is just, not too far along, because I've genetics have been, asked for, but a lot of I just think where it's at right now is a little premature, and I'm focused on this project, and I think this project will also bring a lot of people in the industry, naturally in, and I'll be able to sort of see where things are going, and also show what we're able to do, what I'm able to do through the project, and figure out if it's going to be lounge kind of areas where we create experiences. There's people that I've been speaking to more about that have a ton of experience in that kind of industry, where they're running big restaurants, or they have great spaces that they have so, and that they operating multiple locations, and so things like that, where they're just good people from New York that have been living there a long time, that run good business, and just finding the right people. But I think I'm interested in that sort of thing, whether it's restaurant, kind of food experience, outside of cannabis, but as the dispensaries sort of open up, maybe have a flagship or two, but I'm not really, rushing at that, but more than anything, I'm kind of going genetics forward, where I want to come in and help where I feel like I can the most, and refining kind of what parts of that, with what I want to do with you, and learn more of the extraction side of it. So as I go in there, it's not just one-sided, but even as these industries are they're in each state is being created, that I'll be able to come in and just be able to hit it and contribute the most with the genetics and everything, the most I can for the people I'm working with from the beginning.
That's cool. I'm looking forward to it, man. I think it's gonna be cool.
Yeah.
Sure.
Appreciate you guys.
Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you?
savagefight@gmail.com or mr@sherbinskis.com. Or you could check out my Instagram, Sherbinski415. Send me a shout out. Yeah. Appreciate you guys, and thanks for having me on and the discussion. Wishing everybody the best. Get out there, kill it.
Bro, it was so good to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate you. The conversation was fire. Yeah, Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks, Addison.
Thank you, Mario. Appreciate it, brother.
Thanks,
Later, guys.
everybody. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.